She walked into a lion's den wearing nothing but her rage. Scarlet Hayes had nothing left to lose. Her fiancé was gone. Her dignity was shredded, and in exactly 14 days she'd have to watch him marry someone else, someone richer, someone better connected, someone who wasn't her. So she did the only thing that made sense in her shattered state of mind. She marched into the most dangerous place in the city and made a deal with a man who could destroy her faster than heartbreak ever could. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The elevator descent felt like falling into hell, which was appropriate considering where Scarlet was headed. 47 floors down, each number lighting up on the panel like a countdown to something irreversible. She watched them flicker, 44, 43, 42, and tried to remember how to breathe. Her reflection in the polished steel doors looked like a stranger, mascara smudged beneath red-rimmed eyes. Hair that she'd spent 2 hours perfecting this morning now falling in loose, defeated strands around her shoulders. The designer dress that was supposed to make her feel powerful just made her look like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life, which, she supposed, she had been. The engagement ring was gone. She'd thrown it into the fountain outside Marcus's apartment. His apartment, not theirs, never really theirs, and watched it sink to the bottom like all her stupid, naive hopes. 3 years. 3 years of planning a future that he'd dismantled in under 10 minutes with words that kept replaying in her head like a song she couldn't turn off. It's not personal, Scarlet. It's politics. My father needs this alliance. Senator Crawford's daughter brings connections we need, you have to understand. She understood perfectly. She understood that love meant nothing when ambition came knocking. She understood that she'd been temporary all along, a placeholder until something better came along. She understood that in Marcus Hyland's world, she was forgettable. The elevator chimed. Sub-level 3. The doors opened onto a hallway that shouldn't exist. She'd done her research, spent the last 6 hours spiraling down an internet rabbit hole that took her from Marcus's Instagram announcement. Thrilled to announce my engagement to Elizabeth Crawford. Looking forward to our future together. Posted 4 hours after he'd broken up with Scarlet. To forums and articles about the city's real power structures. The ones that didn't show up in Forbes or the society pages. The Vault. That's what they called it. A private club that operated below the city's glittering surface, where men who shaped the world from shadows came to make deals that would never see daylight. Getting in required more than money. It required connections, reputation, or in Scarlet's case, complete reckless desperation. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Soft lighting cast everything in amber tones that should have felt warm but instead felt predatory. Like walking into the belly of something that was deciding whether to digest you. Her heels clicked against marble flooring that probably cost more than her entire year's salary as a museum curator. Correction, former museum curator. She'd quit that job to support Marcus's campaign, to be the perfect political girlfriend, to reshape herself into someone worthy of standing beside him. Another thing she'd thrown away. The hallway ended at a door. Heavy, dark wood with no handle, no sign, no indication of what lay beyond. Just a small camera lens above the frame, watching, evaluating. Scarlet raised her hand to knock, then stopped. What was she doing? This was insane. She should turn around, go home, let herself fall apart like a normal person whose life had just imploded. Eat ice cream. Watch terrible movies. Cry until she dehydrated. Process her grief like a functional human being instead of... The door opened. A man stood there. Tall, built like he broke things professionally, wearing a suit that probably had a gun hidden in it. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were taking inventory. Her dress, her shoes, her face, her hands, cataloging details with the efficiency of someone trained to assess threats. You lost? His voice was flat. No. Scarlet lifted her chin, trying to channel a confidence she absolutely didn't feel. I'm here to see Luca Devereaux. Something flickered across the man's face. Surprise, maybe. Or amusement at her audacity. You have an appointment? No. Then you're lost. He started to close the door. Wait. She put her hand out, stopping just short of touching the wood. Please, I need 5 minutes. Tell him Scarlet Hayes wants to make him an offer. Lady, I don't know what you think happens here, but tell him I'll make it worth his time. Her voice cracked slightly, desperation bleeding through. Please. The man studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out a phone, turned away, spoke in low tones she couldn't quite catch. When he turned back, his expression had shifted into something that might have been pity. He'll see you. 5 minutes. He stepped aside, gesturing her through. Don't waste them. The room beyond was not what she expected. She'd imagined something dark and gothic, all leather and shadows and implicit violence. Instead, she walked into a space that looked like a luxury lounge. Low lighting, yes, but sophisticated. Modern, sleek furniture arranged in intimate clusters. A bar along one wall, backlit bottles glowing like captured fire. Floor-to-ceiling windows that shouldn't exist this far underground but somehow did, revealing what looked like a garden but had to be some kind of elaborate projection or installation. There were maybe a dozen people scattered throughout the space. They looked up when she entered. A room full of predators registering new prey, then dismissed her just as quickly. Unimportant. Irrelevant. Except for one. He sat alone in the far corner, a glass of something amber in his hand. His attention seemingly focused on the tablet in front of him. But Scarlet knew he was aware of her. She could feel his attention like heat against her skin even though he hadn't looked up. Luca Devereaux. She'd found 3 photographs of him online. One from 5 years ago at some charity gala. He'd looked bored and dangerous in a tuxedo, like a wolf forced into formal wear. One from a security camera still that had leaked during a federal investigation that went nowhere. Grainy, dark, but you could see the cold calculation in his expression. One from a newspaper article about his legitimate businesses, restaurants, real estate, private security, where he looked almost human. Almost. In person, he was worse. Not worse looking. That was the problem. He was beautiful in a way that made you forget to be careful. Dark hair that was slightly too long, like he couldn't be bothered with regular haircuts. Sharp features that suggested Mediterranean ancestry somewhere in his bloodline. A mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile honestly. And eyes, even from across the room, even though he still wasn't looking at her, that promised he saw everything you were trying to hide. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that suggested he didn't just order violence, he committed it personally. No tie, no jacket. Like he'd started the day in formal wear and slowly shed the pretense of civility as the hours passed. The guard who'd let her in gestured toward Luca's corner. 5 minutes. Scarlet's legs felt disconnected from her body as she crossed the room. Everyone was watching now, even though they were pretending not to. She could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their anticipation of whatever was about to happen. She stopped 3 feet from his table. Mr. Devereaux. He took a sip of his drink, still didn't look up. You have 4 minutes left. His voice was lower than she expected. Rough, like gravel wrapped in honey. The kind of voice that could make threats sound like promises. I need your help. The words tumbled out before she could plan them. I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend. That got his attention. He looked up slowly, like someone who never did anything quickly because he didn't have to. His eyes were dark. Not brown, not black. Something in between. And they moved over her face with the same cataloging efficiency as his guard. Reading her. Dissecting her. Seeing things she didn't want seen. Explain. One word, not a question, a command. Scarlet swallowed. My fiancé, ex-fiancé, is getting married in 2 weeks. To someone else. He's having this huge wedding, this massive political statement, and She stopped, hating how pathetic she sounded. I can't show up alone. I can't give him the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I need someone who will make him regret ever letting me go. Someone who will make everyone in that room realize they underestimated me. And you think I'm that someone? It wasn't a question. Yes. Why? Because you're terrifying. The truth escaped before she could dress it up. Because one look from you and people remember they're mortal. Because if you walk into that wedding with me, no one will dare pity me. They'll be too busy wondering what the hell I did to catch your attention. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. You want to rent my reputation for a night? Yes, I'll pay you. I don't have much, but I have some savings, and I don't need your money. He leaned back, studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. What's his name? The fiancé? Marcus. Marcus Highland. Recognition sparked. Robert Highland's son. The city councilman running for mayor. Yes. Who's he marrying? Elizabeth Crawford, Senator Crawford's daughter. Political dynasty joining political dynasty. Luca's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. And you were what exactly? The warm-up act? The words stung because they were true. Something like that. Tell me why I should care about your revenge fantasy. Scarlett felt something crack inside her. Maybe it was the last piece of her pride, or maybe it was the seal on the rage she'd been trying to contain all day. You shouldn't. You have no reason to help me. I'm nobody. I don't have connections or power or anything you could possibly want. But I walked down here anyway because I'm out of options and out of dignity and apparently out of my mind. So if you're going to say no, just say it. Don't make me stand here and humiliate myself for entertainment. The silence that followed felt like standing on a cliff edge. Then Luca gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. What? Sit down. You're making my neck hurt. Scarlett sat. The leather chair was too comfortable, disarming. She perched on the edge, ready to run if necessary. Luca finished his drink, set the glass down with careful precision. You interest me. What? Most people who walk into this room are either stupid or desperate. You're clearly desperate, but you're not stupid. Stupid people lead with threats or begging. You led with honesty. He tilted his head slightly. That takes either courage or a complete death wish. I haven't decided which. Does it matter? To me? No. But it should matter to you. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, bringing them into the kind of proximity that felt deliberately invasive. Here's the problem with your plan, Scarlett. You want me to show up, look dangerous, make your ex regret his life choices. But that's thinking small. That's settling for a single moment of satisfaction that won't change anything. You'll have your night of feeling powerful, and then what? You go back to being the woman who got left behind? She didn't have an answer. I'll help you, he said, but not with your plan, with mine. What's your plan? 2 weeks. You move into my home, you let me reshape everything about you, how you dress, how you speak, how you carry yourself. I'll strip away every insecurity your ex planted in you and rebuild you into someone no one will dare underestimate, not just for one night, but permanently. You want to walk into that wedding and destroy him? Fine, but we're going to destroy the version of yourself that let him matter in the first place. Scarlett's heart hammered against her ribs. Why would you do that? Because I'm bored. He said it casually, like admitting he was hungry. Because I want to see if you're actually as strong as you're pretending to be, and because his eyes locked onto hers with sudden, complete focus. When I show up at that wedding with you, I want it to be clear that you're not using me as a prop. I want everyone in that room to wonder why the hell I'm choosing to be there. That only works if you're worth choosing. And if I fail, if I can't become whoever you think I should be, then you fail. He shrugged. And I'll have wasted 2 weeks, but you'll have wasted more than that. You'll have proven that your ex was right about you. It was manipulation, obvious, deliberate manipulation. He was daring her, challenging her pride, offering her exactly what she wanted while making sure she knew the cost. A smart person would walk away. A rational person would recognize this for the terrible idea it was. Scarlett extended her hand across the table. 2 weeks. Luca looked at her hand like it was a curiosity. Then he took it, his grip firm and warm and somehow threatening. 2 weeks. But understand something, Scarlett. Once we start this, you don't quit. You don't back out because it gets hard or scary or uncomfortable. You commit completely or you don't commit at all. Those are the terms. I understand. No. He held her hand a beat longer than necessary. You don't, but you will. He released her hand and pulled out his phone, typed something quick. My driver will take you home. Pack what you need. He'll pick you up in 2 hours. 2 hours? Scarlett's voice pitched higher. I thought, I need time to think about this too. You've already thought about it. That's why you came here. He stood, and she realized he was taller than she'd estimated, easily 6'2". 2 hours, Scarlett. If you're not ready, I'll assume you changed your mind. And I don't make offers twice. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing through a door she hadn't noticed. The guard who'd let her in appeared at her elbow, like he'd materialized from shadows. This way, miss. Scarlett followed him in a daze, back down the hallway, into the elevator, up through the building to street level, where the city lights felt too bright, too normal, too unchanged, despite the fact that her entire existence had just shifted into territory she didn't recognize. A black car waited at the curb. Sleek, expensive, tinted windows that prevented anyone from seeing inside. The guard opened the back door. 2 hours, he reminded her. Don't be late. He hates waiting. Scarlett slid into the leather interior. The door closed with a solid thunk that sounded like a cell door locking. The driver, another large man in a dark suit, didn't speak, just pulled smoothly into traffic. She watched the city slide past the window and tried to process what she'd just done. She'd walked into a crime boss's private club and made a deal that probably qualified as the worst decision of her life. She was going to move into his home, and let him reshape her like she was clay that needed fixing. For 2 weeks. 2 weeks of living in a world she didn't understand with a man who looked at her like she was an equation he was solving. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Claire. Called you 6 times. Are you okay? Marcus is such a bastard. Come over. I have wine and rage, and we can plot elaborate revenge scenarios. Scarlett stared at the message. She should go to Claire's apartment. She should surround herself with people who loved her, who would remind her she had value, who would help her heal like a normal person. Instead, she typed back. Can't tonight. Something came up. I'm okay. I'll call you tomorrow. The lie sat in her throat like glass. Her apartment looked smaller than she remembered when she walked in. 1 bedroom in a building that was slowly being gentrified, meaning her rent kept rising while the plumbing stayed broken. She'd always planned to move once she and Marcus got married. Once his campaign took off. Once their real life started. All those onces were gone now. She dragged her largest suitcase out of the closet and started pulling clothes off hangers without really seeing them. What did you pack for 2 weeks of being transformed by a dangerous man? Business casual? Evening wear? Combat gear? Her hands were shaking. She stopped, sat on the edge of her bed, and let herself feel it. The fear, the absurdity, the reckless, desperate hope that maybe, Luca Devereaux could actually do what he promised. Maybe she could walk into Marcus's wedding as someone new, someone powerful, someone who didn't feel like the universe's punchline. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. The driver will be there in 90 minutes. Bring comfortable clothes. Nothing fancy. Leave the heels. No signature. But she knew who it was from. Scarlett looked at her closet full of clothes she'd bought to impress Marcus, to fit into his world, to be the right kind of girlfriend for a politician. Soft colors. Classic cuts. Nothing too bold or attention-grabbing. Everything designed to complement, never to compete. She started pulling them off hangers and dropping them in a pile on the floor. Then she went to the back of her closet, to the section she'd been ignoring for the past year. Black jeans that actually fit her body instead of hiding it. A leather jacket she'd bought on impulse and never worn. Boots with actual personality. T-shirts that said things instead of playing it safe. She packed those. 73 minutes later, she was standing on the sidewalk with her suitcase when the black car pulled up. Different driver this time. Younger, less overtly threatening, but still carrying himself like violence was a language he spoke fluently. He loaded her suitcase into the trunk without comment, opened the door, waited. Scarlett took one last look at her apartment building, at the life she was leaving behind, at the person she'd been 6 hours ago. Then she got in the car. They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city center behind. The buildings grew taller, more expensive, more separated from each other by gates and walls, and the kind of security that money bought. This was where the real power lived. Not the flashy wealth of downtown penthouses, but the quiet, permanent money that shapes cities across generations. The car turned into a driveway that curved through perfectly manicured grounds. Trees lined the path, old and expensive and placed with architectural precision. Then the house came into view. No, not a house. An estate. Modern architecture that somehow looked timeless. Glass and stone and clean lines that suggested whoever designed it understood that beauty didn't need to announce itself. Lights glowed from within, warm against the evening darkness. It looked like the kind of place where important people made important decisions, where power was concentrated and wielded with precision. Scarlett's stomach dropped. "This is where he lives?" The driver didn't answer, just pulled up to the front entrance and came around to open her door. She got out on legs that felt uncertain. Her suitcase appeared beside her. The front door opened. Not Luca. A woman, maybe 60, dressed in elegant casual clothes that probably cost more than Scarlett's entire wardrobe. She had kind eyes and the posture of someone who'd been managing complicated households for decades. "Miss Hayes, welcome. I'm Helen. I manage the house." She gestured inside. "Please, come in. Mr. Devereaux is expecting you." The interior was just as intimidating as the exterior. High ceilings, art that was probably original and definitely expensive. Furniture that suggested someone with actual taste had arranged everything with care. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was the physical embodiment of a world Scarlett didn't belong to. "This way," Helen said, leading her through the foyer toward a hallway that opened onto what looked like a living area. "Can I get you anything? Water? Tea?" "I'm fine. Thank you." They stopped at the entrance to a large room. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a lit pool and garden beyond. Inside, Luca stood with his back to them, looking at something on his phone. He'd changed clothes, now wearing dark jeans and a simple black t-shirt that somehow looked more expensive than the dress shirt from earlier. "Mr. Devereaux, Miss Hayes has arrived." He turned, pocketed his phone. His eyes moved over Scarlett with that same cataloging attention, lingering on her face long enough that she felt exposed. "Thank you, Helen. That'll be all." Helen disappeared like smoke. Suddenly, it was just the two of them in this massive room, this massive house, this massive decision that Scarlett had made without thinking it through. "You came," Luca said. "You didn't think I would?" "I thought you had a 60-40 chance of changing your mind." He moved closer, each step deliberate. "But here you are, either brave or foolish. We'll find out which. What happens now?" "Now?" He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Now we establish the rules. First, no lying. I don't care how embarrassing the truth is, you tell it. Second, no halfway. If I tell you to do something, you do it completely or you explain why you can't. Third, no quitting. You signed up for 2 weeks. That means 14 days, regardless of how hard it gets. Understood?" "Understood." "Good." He pulled his phone out again, glanced at the screen. "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., we start. Helen will show you to your room. Get some sleep. You'll need it." "That's it? No grand speech about transformation? No detailed explanation of your master plan?" His mouth curved into something that was almost a smile. "You want a pep talk?" "I want to know what I'm getting into." "No, you don't. If you knew, you'd run." He moved past her toward the hallway. 7 a.m., Scarlett. Don't be late." She stood in the middle of his living room, surrounded by wealth and danger and choices she couldn't take back, and wondered if she'd just made the best decision of her life or signed her own death warrant. Helen reappeared like a ghost. "Let me show you to your room, dear." The bedroom was on the second floor, at the end of a hallway that probably cost more per square foot than Scarlett's entire apartment building. It was gorgeous. A king bed with linens that looked like they'd been woven by angels, a sitting area by the window, a bathroom attached that featured a shower with approximately 17 settings and a tub deep enough to swim in. "Mr. Devereaux asked me to provide these," Helen said, gesturing to a stack of clothes on the bed. "For tomorrow. He said you should wear them." Scarlett picked up the top item. Black athletic leggings, a gray tank top, running shoes in her exact size. How did he know? "He knows a great many things, dear. It's part of what makes him good at what he does." Helen moved toward the door. Breakfast is at 6:30 in the kitchen. I'll come get you. Try to rest. She left, closing the door with a soft click. Scarlett sat on the edge of the bed that was too comfortable, in the room that was too beautiful, in the house that belonged to a man who was too dangerous. She pulled out her phone, opened her messages, looked at the string of texts from Claire she hadn't answered. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. She should tell someone where she was. She should have an exit strategy. She should be smarter about this. Instead, she set the phone on the nightstand without responding. She changed into the clothes Luca had provided because apparently they were starting tomorrow at 7 a.m. and she needed to be ready. She lay down on sheets that felt like clouds and stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about what she'd done. Sleep came eventually, fitful and full of dreams where she was falling and couldn't find the ground. She woke to soft knocking. Disoriented, she fumbled for her phone, 6:15 a.m., and remembered where she was. Helen's voice came through the door. "Miss Hayes, breakfast in 15 minutes." Scarlett dragged herself out of bed, splashed water on her face, tried to make herself look human. The girl in the mirror looked pale, scared, young. 2 weeks, she reminded herself. You can survive 2 weeks of anything. The kitchen was enormous and somehow still cozy. Helen had set out coffee, fruit, toast, eggs. Scarlett sat at the counter and tried to eat, but her stomach was doing gymnastics. At exactly 7 a.m., Luca walked in. He wore athletic clothes similar to hers, black joggers, a gray shirt, running shoes. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd already worked out. He looked at her breakfast, at how little she'd eaten, then at her face. Nervous? Should I be? Probably. He grabbed a bottle of water from the refrigerator. Follow me. She followed him through the house, out back to the grounds, past the pool, down a path through manicured gardens to a large building she'd seen from the car but hadn't registered. Inside was a private gym that would make professional athletes weep. Top-of-the-line equipment, mats, weights, spaces designed for combat training. We're starting with the physical, Luca said, moving to the center of the mat area. Your body tells a story before you open your mouth. Right now it says you're apologizing for existing. We're going to change that. I don't, Scarlett started. Walk across the mat, from there to here. He pointed. She walked, self-conscious, aware of his eyes tracking every movement. Again, slower. She did it again. What do you see? He asked. What? In yourself, when you walk. What are you telling the world? Scarlett hesitated. I don't know. Yes, you do. You're smart enough to be honest. What does your body say? She forced herself to think about it, to really consider how she moved through space. That I'm trying not to take up too much room, that I'm sorry for being here. Exactly. Luca moved toward her, circling like he was examining a sculpture. You make yourself smaller. Shoulders slightly forward, protecting your chest. Head down just enough to avoid direct eye contact. Steps that minimize noise and presence. You've spent years training yourself to be invisible, to be accommodating, to not threaten anyone with your existence. Each word hit like a diagnosis. Now watch. He walked across the mat. It was different, completely different. His shoulders were back but not stiff. His head was up but not arrogant. Each step landed with confidence, not aggression. He moved like someone who knew he belonged everywhere and didn't need to prove it. Your turn, he said. Walk like you own this room. I don't know how. Figure it out. Scarlett walked again, tried to copy what she'd seen. It felt ridiculous, like she was playing pretend. Shoulders back, Gates, Luca said from behind her. Not like you're at military attention, like you're creating space for yourself to breathe. Again. She adjusted, walked. Chin up, look forward, not at the floor. The ground isn't that interesting. Again, adjust, walk. Slower. You're rushing like you're trying to get it over with. Take your time. You're allowed to exist in space. Again, again, and again, and again. They spent 3 hours just on walking, 3 hours of Luca breaking down every component of how she moved, every habit she'd developed, every way she'd learned to minimize herself. By the end, Scarlett was exhausted and frustrated and starting to hate him a little. "Better," he said finally. "Not good, but better." "This is insane," she snapped. "It's just walking. Who cares how I walk?" "Everyone." He tossed her a water bottle. "Every person you meet makes judgments in the first 3 seconds. Before you say a word, they've decided if you're worth their attention. Your ex looked at you and saw someone temporary, someone he could replace. We're making sure no one makes that mistake again. By teaching me to walk differently. By teaching you to stop apologizing for breathing." He headed toward the door. "Lunch is at noon. Helen will bring it to your room. Rest. We go again at 2. He left her there, sweaty and frustrated, and starting to realize how deep this 2-week commitment was going to cut. The afternoon was worse. He focused on her voice, how she spoke, where her words came from, what her tone suggested. Made her repeat the same sentences dozens of times with different inflections, different energy, different intention. "Say it like you mean it." "I am." "No, you're saying it like you're asking permission to mean it. There's a difference." By the time he released her at 7 p.m., Scarlett was ready to collapse. Her muscles ached, her throat hurt, her brain felt like it had been wrung out and hung up to dry. Helen brought dinner to her room. Scarlett ate mechanically, showered, fell into bed without even checking her phone. Day 2 was the same. Day 3 was worse. Luca was relentless, pushing her, challenging every instinct she had, breaking down patterns she didn't even know she'd developed. He wasn't cruel, never raised his voice, never insulted her. But he also didn't allow for weakness. If she couldn't do something, he made her do it until she could. By day 5, she hated him. By day 7, she started to understand what he was doing. They were in the gym, working on presence. He'd set up a scenario. She had to walk into the room and command attention without saying anything. "Again," he said after her 3rd failed attempt. "I don't know what you want from me." The words exploded out. "I'm doing everything you're telling me to do, and it's never enough." "Because you're still performing." He walked over, stopped close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. "You're still trying to be what you think I want instead of finding what you actually are. Stop trying to impress me. Stop caring what I think. Walk into that room like you belong there because you decided you do. Not because someone gave you permission. That's easy for you to say. She gestured at him, frustrated. "You're you. You've probably never doubted yourself a day in your life." Something dark flickered across his face. "You think confidence is something you're born with? You think I woke up one day powerful? I built this, every piece. And before I could build anything, I had to decide I deserved to." "How?" The question came out smaller than she intended. "How do you just decide that? You stop waiting for the world to tell you you're enough. You stop looking for validation from people who don't deserve to judge you. You accept that you're going to fail, and you do it anyway, because the alternative is staying invisible forever." He stepped back, creating space. "Now, walk into that room. Not for me, not for your ex, for yourself. Show me who Scarlett Hayes is when she stops apologizing." She took a breath. Let something shift inside her. Walked across the mat. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. Something had unlocked, a feeling that started in her chest and moved outward. She wasn't performing, she was just existing, taking up space without asking permission. When she reached the other side, she turned back. Luca was watching with an expression she couldn't read. "There," he said quietly. "That's it. That's what we're building." Something changed after that. The work was still brutal, but Scarlett started to feel it less like punishment and more like excavation. Like Luca was digging through layers of conditioning to find something real underneath. She started pushing back when she disagreed, started asking questions instead of just accepting his directives, started believing, just a little, that maybe she could become whoever she wanted to be. On day 10, he switched tactics. "We're going out tonight, he announced during their morning session. "Where?" "Does it matter?" "I'd like to know what I'm walking into." "Good. That's growth." He smiled, rare and genuine. "Dinner, a restaurant I own. You'll meet some of my people. Consider it a field test." Scarlett's stomach tightened. "A test of what?" Everything we've been working on. You've been practicing in a controlled environment. Time to see if it translates to the real world. And if I fail, then we figure out what went wrong and fix it." He headed for the door, then paused. "Scarlett, you're not going to fail." The certainty in his voice stayed with her all day as she tried on clothes, actual clothes, not athletic wear, and attempted to prepare for whatever this dinner would be. Helen helped her choose an outfit. Black pants that fit perfectly, a dark green silk blouse that made her hair look rich instead of mousy, heels that weren't too high but added the right amount of height. When she looked in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. Not because she looked so different, but because she was standing differently, holding herself like someone who deserved to take up space. They left at 7. Luca drove, a sleek car that probably cost more than most people's houses. He was quiet, focused on the road, but his presence filled the space between them. The restaurant was downtown, discreet entrance, no obvious sign. Inside was elegant and dark, the kind of place where deals happened over expensive wine. The host greeted Luca with respect and maybe fear, led them to a private room in the back. 3 men were already there. They stood when Luca entered, and Scarlett felt their attention shift to her immediately, evaluating, measuring, deciding what she was worth. She lifted her chin, met their eyes, didn't apologize for existing. "Gentlemen," Luca said, "this is Scarlett Hayes." He didn't explain who she was, didn't give her a title or context, just presented her like she was self-evident. The dinner lasted 3 hours. The men talked business, vague enough that Scarlett couldn't tell if it was legal or otherwise, and included her in the conversation with surprising ease. They asked her opinion, listened when she spoke, treated her like she belonged, because she acted like she belonged. On the drive home, Luca was quiet again. Scarlett watched the city lights slide past. "I did okay?" she finally asked. "You did more than okay. You held your own with men who eat people alive professionally. You didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't try to make yourself smaller." He glanced at her. "You were yourself, and yourself is more than enough." Something warm unfurled in her chest. Not attraction, exactly. Or maybe it was. Maybe after 2 weeks of this man seeing every broken piece of her and working to rebuild them, maybe some wires had gotten crossed. Maybe she was confusing gratitude for something else. Or maybe Luca Devereaux was dangerous for reasons that had nothing to do with his reputation. 4 more days, she said softly. Until the wedding. Yeah. Are you ready? Scarlett thought about Marcus, about walking into that venue and facing everyone who'd pitied her, about proving that being left behind hadn't destroyed her. "I'm ready," she said, and for the first time, she believed it. The morning of day 11 started differently. Scarlett woke to find an envelope on her nightstand that hadn't been there when she fell asleep. Thick cream paper, no name, sealed with dark wax. She opened it carefully, pulled out a single card with Luca's handwriting, sharp, precise strokes that matched his personality. Garden. 8 a.m. Wear something you'd wear to brunch with friends you're trying to impress. She checked her phone. 7:15. No context, no explanation. Just another test she hadn't seen coming. The outfit took 20 minutes to decide on. She settled on a pale blue sundress she'd packed but hadn't worn yet. White sneakers that looked casual but expensive. Minimal jewelry. Hair down, loose, the way she used to wear it before Marcus told her updos looked more sophisticated. Looking at herself in the mirror, she realized she looked young. Happy, almost. Like someone who hadn't spent the last 2 weeks being systematically rebuilt. The garden was at the far end of the property, through a gate she'd never explored. When she pushed it open, she found Luca sitting at a wrought iron table under a pergola covered in flowering vines. Breakfast was laid out, pastries, fruit, coffee, in a French press. He was reading something on his tablet, dressed in dark jeans and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up. He looked up when she approached. Something flickered across his face, too fast to identify. "Sit." Oh. She sat, poured herself coffee because her hands needed something to do. "You look nervous," he observed. "I don't know what this is." "Breakfast." He pushed the pastries toward her. Eat something. You've been losing weight. She had. The physical training had been intense, and stress had a way of killing her appetite. She took a croissant, tore off a piece, let the butter melt on her tongue. 3 days until the wedding, Luca said. You're ready for the performance aspect. You can walk into a room and own it. You can hold conversations with people who'd normally intimidate you. You can present yourself as someone worth noticing. He paused. But there's something we haven't addressed. What? Why you let Marcus matter so much in the first place? Scarlett set down her coffee. I loved him. Love doesn't require you to shrink yourself. Love doesn't ask you to apologize for existing. What you felt for Marcus wasn't love, it was the desperate need to be chosen. There's a difference. The words hit like a slap. You don't know anything about what I felt. I know you walked into my club ready to make a deal with a criminal because you couldn't stand the thought of Marcus seeing you alone. I know you spent 3 years reshaping yourself into whatever he wanted. I know you quit your job, changed your style, modified your opinions to match his political positions. That's not love. That's erasure. So what? I'm just supposed to pretend I never cared about him? No, you're supposed to understand why you cared and why you gave him the power to destroy you when he left. Luca leaned forward. Tell me about your parents. The subject changed through her. What do they have to do with anything? Everything. Tell me. Scarlett looked away toward the flowers climbing the pergola. My father left when I was 7. My mother remarried when I was 12 to a man who made it very clear I was an inconvenience. I learned early that love was conditional, that if you weren't perfect, if you weren't what people needed, they'd leave. So I became very good at being what people needed. And Marcus needed a pretty, accommodating girlfriend who wouldn't challenge him or compete for attention. Someone who made him look good without threatening his position. Suppose to... Yes. The admission tasted bitter. You saw him as your chance to be chosen permanently. If you could just be perfect enough, he'd never leave like your father did. He'd marry you, and that would prove you were worth keeping. Scarlett's throat tightened. Stop. No. Because in 3 days, you're going to walk into that wedding, and if you're still operating from that wound, still believing your worth comes from being chosen, then nothing we've done matters. You'll just find another Marcus to reshape yourself for. I won't prove it. He stood, came around the table, crouched beside her chair so they were eye level. Tell me what you want. Not what Marcus wanted, not what would make your mother approve, not what would fix your childhood. What does Scarlett Hayes actually want from her life? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. You don't know, Luca said quietly, because you've spent so long being what other people needed that you never developed your own wants. That's what we're fixing today. He pulled her to her feet, led her down a path deeper into the garden. They ended up in a clearing with stone benches arranged in a circle, surrounded by trees that created a sense of isolation from the house, the city, everything. Sit, he said, gesturing to one of the benches. He took the one across from her. We're going to play a game. I ask you questions. You answer with the first thing that comes to mind. No filtering. No thinking about what sounds good. Just truth. That's not a game. It is if you're bad at honesty. He pulled out his phone, set it on the bench beside him like he might take notes. What's your favorite color? Blue? Why? Because... She stopped. I don't know. I just like it. Good. That's honest. What kind of food do you actually enjoy? Not what you ate to accommodate Marcus's diet restrictions? Thai food, really spicy, the kind that makes your nose run. Where would you live if money wasn't a factor? Somewhere with a view, maybe the coast, somewhere I could hear the ocean. What do you do for fun when no one's watching? Scarlett hesitated. I used to paint, watercolors, nothing professional, just, it made me feel calm. When did you stop? Marcus said it was a waste of time, that I should focus on more practical hobbies, things that would help with his campaign. So you stopped creating art because a mediocre politician told you to. Luca's voice was flat. What else did you give up? The floodgates opened. She told him about the book club she'd left because Marcus didn't like her friends. The volunteer work at the Children's Museum she'd quit because it didn't align with his campaign platform. The running she'd stopped because he said she was getting too muscular. Small erasures, one after another, until she'd carved away so much of herself there was barely anything left. Luca listened without interrupting. When she finally ran out of confessions, he was quiet for a long moment. "You know what Marcus took from you?" he said finally. "Your ability to know yourself. That's more intimate than anything physical. He got inside your head and convinced you that your instincts were wrong, that your desires didn't matter, that you needed his approval to validate your existence. That's the real violence of what he did. So how do I fix it? You start making choices based on what you want, even when they don't make sense to anyone else, even when they scare you, especially when they scare you." He stood, held out his hand. "Come on, we're going somewhere." "Where? Does it matter?" She took his hand, his grip warm and solid, and let him pull her up. "Yes, actually, I'd like to know." "Good, you're learning." He smiled. "We're going shopping." The city's upscale district was an hour away, full of boutiques that didn't display price tags because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Luca's driver dropped them at the corner and disappeared, apparently used to strange requests. "I don't need clothes," Scarlett said, as Luca guided her toward a store with minimalist windows. "I have enough." "This isn't about need, it's about choice." He opened the door, gestured her inside. "Pick something you love, not something practical, not something appropriate, something that makes you happy to look at." The store was full of pieces that looked like art, flowing fabrics in rich colors, structured jackets with unexpected details, dresses that demanded attention. A woman approached immediately, the kind of salesperson who could smell wealth and knew exactly how to extract it. "Good morning. Can I help you find something?" "She's browsing," Luca said before Scarlett could answer. "Give her space." The woman retreated. Scarlett moved through the racks slowly, touching fabrics, considering colors. Everything was beautiful. Everything was also terrifying because it required declaring what she wanted. She found herself drawn to a dress in deep emerald green, silk, simple cut, but the color was so rich it almost looked alive. She pulled it out, held it up. "Try it on," Luca said from behind her. "It's not practical. I don't have anywhere to wear this." "That's not the question I asked." She tried it on. The dressing room had perfect lighting, mirrors that showed every angle. The dress fit like it had been made for her. Elegant without being formal, bold without being costumey. She looked like someone interesting, someone worth a second glance. When she stepped out, Luca was leaning against the wall, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, and something in his expression shifted, went still. "That's the one," he said. "It's expensive." "I didn't ask about the price." "Luca, I can't let you—" "Do you love it?" He pushed off the wall, moved closer. "Yes or no? Do you love how it makes you feel?" "Yes." "Then it's yours." He pulled out a credit card, handed it to the hovering salesperson. "We'll take it. And those." He pointed to a leather jacket Scarlett had touched earlier, boots she'd admired but dismissed as impractical. "You don't have to do this." "I know. I want to." He waited while the woman rang up the purchase. Scarlett deliberately didn't look at the total, then took the bags. "You're allowed to have things that make you happy, Scarlett. You don't have to earn them. You don't have to justify them. You just have to let yourself want them." They stopped for lunch at a cafe with outdoor seating. Luca ordered in Italian, apparently the owner knew him, and food appeared that Scarlett hadn't chosen but was exactly what she would have wanted. Pasta with truffle oil, wine that tasted like summer, dessert that involved chocolate and raspberries and some kind of magic. "Can I ask you something?" Scarlett said between bites. "You just did." She rolled her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "The real reason. Not because you're bored. You don't seem like someone who does things out of boredom." Luca was quiet for a moment, swirling wine in his glass. "You remind me of someone." "Who?" "My sister." He set down the glass. "She married a man who convinced her she was lucky to have him, who made her small, who took a woman who used to paint murals on buildings without permission and turned her into someone who apologized for breathing too loud. By the time she realized what he'd done, she couldn't remember who she'd been before." "What happened to her?" "She left him, came to me, asked for help rebuilding her life." His jaw tightened. I gave her money, protection, set her up in a new city, but I couldn't give her back what he'd taken. She had to find that herself. It took years. Is she okay now? She's better, stronger, but there's still this shadow sometimes, this moment of hesitation before she states an opinion or makes a choice, like she's waiting for permission. He looked at Scarlett directly. When you walked into my club, desperate and broken and still defiant underneath it all, I saw Elena. Before the marriage, before she learned to shrink, and I thought, maybe this time I could help someone before they lost themselves completely. Oi, right on, mom. So I'm a do-over? A chance to save your sister retroactively? Maybe. Partially. He smiled slightly. Also, you were right. I was bored, and you interested me. Why? Because you asked me for help. Not money, not protection, not revenge. Help becoming someone stronger. Most people don't even know that's possible. They think they're stuck being whoever they've become. Basi, he leaned back. You knew you weren't. That takes unusual self-awareness. Scarlett traced the rim of her wine glass. Did you ever doubt yourself? The way I doubt myself? Yes. When? When I was building this life. I came from nothing, Scarlett. No money, no connections, no power. Just ambition and a willingness to do things other people wouldn't. Every step up, I had people telling me I didn't belong, that I was pretending, that eventually someone would expose me as a fraud. He paused. The difference is, I stopped listening. I decided that belonging wasn't something people gave me. It was something I claimed. That easy? No, it was terrifying. It still is sometimes. But the alternative, waiting for permission to exist fully, that was worse. They walked back through the city slowly. Luca pointed out buildings he owned, restaurants he'd invested in, pieces of the empire he'd built. He told her stories about deals gone wrong, partnerships that imploded, the careful balance of legitimate business and the darker transactions that funded them. You're telling me things you shouldn't, Scarlett said. Aren't you worried I'll, report you or something? No. Why not? Because you won't. You understand that the world isn't black and white, that good people sometimes do questionable things, that morality is complicated. He stopped walking, turned to face her. Also, if you were going to betray me, you'd have done it already. You're loyal to people who earn it. I've seen that. Have you earned it? I think so, but you'll have to decide that for yourself. They got back to the house as the sun was setting. Helen had left dinner in the kitchen, cold salads and grilled fish and bread that smelled like heaven. They ate at the counter instead of the formal dining room, talking about nothing important. Movies they'd seen, books they'd read. The kind of conversation that felt normal, almost friendly. As Scarlett was finishing her wine, Luca's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something in his expression shifted, hardened. I need to handle something, he said, standing. It'll take a few hours. Stay in the house. What's wrong? Nothing you need to worry about, just business. Luca, stay in the house, Scarlett. His voice had gone cold, distant. The warmth from the afternoon vanished like it had never existed. I'll see you in the morning. He left through the back door. Minutes later, she heard a car start, fade into the distance. Scarlett cleaned up dinner slowly, trying not to feel dismissed. This was his world, the one he'd protected her from for nearly 2 weeks. The one where he made decisions she wasn't privy to, handled problems she wasn't equipped to understand. She went to her room, tried to read, gave up. Took a long bath. Got into bed. Lay awake staring at the ceiling. At 2 a.m., she heard the car return. Doors closing, low voices, then silence. The next morning, Helen brought breakfast with a note. Training postponed. Rest today. We'll talk tomorrow. Scarlett spent the day in limbo. Wandered the house. Sat by the pool. Tried not to feel like she was being shut out. At dinner time, Helen brought a tray to her room with another note. Something came up. Don't wait up. On day 13, 2 days before the wedding, Luca finally appeared. Scarlett was in the gym, running on the treadmill because sitting still made her anxious. She heard the door open but didn't stop, didn't look. Let him come to her. He stopped the treadmill by hitting the emergency shutoff. She stumbled, caught herself, turned to face him ready to be angry. Then she saw his face. There was a cut above his left eyebrow, cleaned but recent, bruising along his jaw. His knuckles were wrapped in gauze. He looked exhausted and dangerous, and like he'd spent the last 36 hours doing things she didn't want to imagine. "What happened?" she asked. "Business." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving you right now." He grabbed a water bottle, drank half of it. "We need to talk about the wedding." "Luca, you're hurt." "I'm fine. The wedding, Saturday night. Are you ready?" "Are you seriously going to pretend you're not bleeding?" "I'm not bleeding. I was. Now I'm not. Focus, Scarlett." He set down the water. "The plan. We arrive together. I stay by your side. We make it clear that you're with me. You handle your ex however you see fit. Then we leave. Simple. What aren't you telling me?" "A lot of things. Most of which you don't need to know." "That's not fair." "Fair?" He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You want fair? Fair would be me leaving you the hell alone instead of dragging you into my life. Fair would be me keeping my distance so you don't end up collateral damage in a world you don't understand." "Then why didn't you?" "Because I'm selfish." The admission came out raw. "Because I liked having you here. Because for 2 weeks I got to pretend I was someone who helped people instead of—" He stopped himself. "It doesn't matter. After Saturday, this is done. You get your moment. I get to watch Marcus realize what he lost. We both move on." "What if I don't want to move on?" The words hung in the air between them. Luca went very still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe the last 2 weeks meant something. Maybe I don't want this to end Saturday night. Maybe—" She stopped, trying to find the right words. "Maybe I care about what happens to you. Maybe I want to know why you're hurt. Maybe I want to be part of your life instead of just a temporary project. You don't know what you're asking for. Then tell me." "No." He moved toward the door. "Get some rest. Big day after tomorrow." "Luca, this conversation is over." He left, and Scarlett stood in the gym, alone, realizing that somewhere in the last 13 days, she'd developed feelings for a man who was determined to push her away the second their deal was complete. Day 14. Wedding day. The day everything was supposed to come together. Scarlett woke early, nerves making sleep impossible. Helen had laid out the green dress from their shopping trip, along with shoes and jewelry that appeared from nowhere. Everything perfect. Everything planned. She got ready slowly, carefully. Hair loose and natural. Makeup that enhanced without hiding. The dress fit like a dream. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone strong. Someone worth noticing. Someone who didn't need validation from men who didn't deserve her. A knock at the door. "Miss Hayes, Mr. Devereaux is waiting downstairs." Scarlett took a breath. This was it. The moment she'd been preparing for. Time to prove that Marcus's abandonment hadn't destroyed her. Time to walk back into that world and show everyone exactly who Scarlett Hayes had become. She opened the door and walked downstairs. Luca stood in the foyer wearing a black suit that probably cost more than a car. He looked dangerous and elegant, and like every bad decision you'd happily make twice. When he saw her coming down the stairs, something flickered across his face. Appreciation, maybe, or something deeper he wasn't allowing himself to show. "You look—" He stopped. Started again. "You're ready." "I am." "Remember what we practiced. Walk in like you own the room. Hold your head up. Don't apologize for anything. And if Marcus tries to talk to you, say, 'I know what to do.'" "Good." He offered his arm. "Let's go destroy some people." The venue was exactly what Scarlett expected. Old money elegance, every detail screaming wealth and connections. Valets parking cars. Guests and designer everything. The kind of event where people measured their worth by who noticed them. They walked in together, and the room noticed. Conversations stuttered. Heads turned. People who'd ignored Scarlett at dozens of political functions suddenly couldn't look away. Because she wasn't alone. Because Luca Devereaux, whose reputation preceded him in dangerous whispers, had his hand on the small of her back like she was something precious. Marcus stood near the entrance, playing host, his new fiancée Elizabeth beside him looking perfect and political. He saw Scarlett and went pale. Then he saw Luca and went completely still. Scarlett walked right up to them, head high, shoulders back. Every lesson Luca had taught her alive in her body. Marcus, Elizabeth, congratulations. Her voice was steady, warm even. Beautiful venue. I'm sure you'll be very happy together. Marcus found his voice. Scarlett, I didn't think you'd come. Why wouldn't I? We ended things maturely. No hard feelings. She felt Luca's presence beside her, solid and dangerous. This is Luca Devereaux. Luca, this is Marcus Highland and his fiancée. Luca shook Marcus's hand, too firm, too long, making it clear this was a dominance display. Congratulations on your marriage. I hope it lasts longer than your engagement to Scarlett did. Marcus's face went red. Elizabeth looked confused. Scarlett fought down a smile. We should find our seats, Scarlett said smoothly. Lovely seeing you both. She walked away without waiting for a response. Luca beside her, his hand warm on her back, guiding her through the crowd. People parted for them, made space, watched with poorly concealed curiosity. They found their table, placed strategically where Scarlett would have to watch the ceremony, but far enough back to be dismissed. She sat down, and Luca took the chair beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. How are you feeling? He asked quietly. Good. Really good, actually. She looked at him. Thank you for this. For everything. Don't thank me yet. Night's not over. The ceremony was exactly what Scarlett expected. Traditional, formal, designed to project power and stability. Marcus and Elizabeth looked perfect together. Two political dynasties joining forces. Everything Scarlett could never have been for him. And she felt nothing. No heartbreak, no jealousy, no desperate wish that she was the one in the white dress. Just a mild sense of relief that she'd dodged this particular bullet. When the ceremony ended and people moved toward the reception, Luca leaned close. You okay? I'm better than okay. I'm free. He smiled, genuine and warm. There she is. The reception was harder. Open bar, dancing, people networking and making connections. Scarlett and Luca stayed together, moving through the crowd like a unit. He introduced her to people she'd never have access to otherwise. Made it clear she was important, worth knowing. Then Marcus approached. Can we talk? He asked Scarlett, ignoring Luca completely. Alone? Luca stiffened, but Scarlett put a hand on his arm. It's okay. You sure? I'm sure. She followed Marcus to a quiet corner of the venue, aware of eyes watching. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, nervous gesture she recognized. You look good, he said. Different. Thank you. Who is he? Really? Someone who sees me. Actually sees me. Not what I could do for him or how I made him look. Me. Scarlett, I know I hurt you, but you have to understand the pressure I was under. I don't actually. I don't have to understand anything. You made your choice. You picked ambition over us. That's fine. You're allowed to do that. But don't stand here on your wedding day and try to make me absolve you. I'm not interested. Are you serious with him? Devereaux? That's none of your business. He's dangerous, Scarlett. Everyone knows what he is. You could get hurt. I did get hurt. By you. You spent 3 years convincing me I needed to be smaller to deserve love. Luca spent 2 weeks teaching me I was already enough. So don't lecture me about dangerous men, Marcus. You're the one who did real damage. She walked away before he could respond. Found Luca standing exactly where she'd left him, watching. That looked intense, he said. It was necessary. She smiled. Can we leave? I think I'm done here. Absolutely. They made their exit, smooth, unhurried, like leaving was their idea all along. The car was waiting. They got in, and as the venue disappeared behind them, Scarlett felt something enormous lift from her chest. I'm proud of you, Luca said quietly. You handled that perfectly. I meant what I said, about being free. He doesn't have power over me anymore. None of them do. That's the goal. You're you again, maybe for the first time. The car pulled up to the house. Their house, for 13 more hours. Tomorrow she'd pack her things and go back to her apartment, her life. Whatever came next. The deal would be complete. Unless. They walked inside. Helen had left lights on, wine breathing on the counter, cheese and fruit arranged like she knew they'd need comfort food. Luca poured 2 glasses, handed her one. To revenge well executed, he said, to transformation. She clinked her glass against his. They drank. The silence stretched, comfortable and dangerous. What happens now? Scarlett asked. Now you go back to your life. You find a job that makes you happy. You paint again. You build a future based on what you want, not what anyone else expects. You become the person we spent 2 weeks uncovering. And you? I go back to my life. Business. Obligations. The usual chaos. Will we see each other again? Luca set down his wine glass, looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Scarlett, you need to understand something. My world isn't safe. The last 2 days, the reason I was gone, someone tried to make a move against me. It's handled now, but it won't be the last time. There will always be someone trying to take what I've built. Always be danger. Always be risk. I'm not afraid. You should be. You should be terrified, because if we keep seeing each other, if this becomes more than it is, you become a target, and I have enough blood on my hands without adding yours. So that's it? 2 weeks and done? You don't get a say in what I can handle? I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need honesty. Do you want me in your life or not? The question hung between them. Luca looked at her like he was trying to memorize her face. What I want doesn't matter. Yes, it does. It's the only thing that matters. Do you want me, Luca? Yes or no? Yes. The word came out rough. But Scarlett closed the distance between them, stood close enough to feel the heat of him. Then stop deciding what's good for me. Stop pushing me away to protect me from choices I'm capable of making myself. I know what you are. I know what your world looks like. And I'm telling you, I want to be part of it anyway. You'll get hurt. Maybe. Or maybe I'll surprise you. Maybe I'm stronger than you think. I know you're strong. That's not the question. Then what is? Whether I'm selfish enough to keep you. He reached up, touched her face gently. Because once I do, once I let this become real, I won't be able to let go. And you need to understand that about me. I don't do temporary. I don't do halfway. If you're mine completely. Scarlett's heart hammered. What if I want to be? Then we're both making a terrible decision. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and claiming, and 2 weeks of tension finally breaking. Scarlett kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer, trying to eliminate any space between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers. This is a bad idea, he said. Probably. You could still walk away, should walk away. I don't want to. Neither do I. He pulled back enough to look at her. Okay, we try this. But you need to promise me something. What? If it gets too dangerous, if my world starts threatening yours, you tell me. You don't be brave. You don't try to handle it alone. You come to me immediately. Okay? I mean it, Scarlett. I know, I promise. He kissed her again, softer this time, like sealing a contract. Then he stepped back, put safe distance between them. You should get some rest. We can figure out logistics tomorrow. Logistics? Where you'll live, how we'll make this work, security measures, all the boring practical things. I could stay here. The words escaped before she thought them through. If you want. I want. But let's take it slow. You keep your apartment. We date like normal people. I'll try very hard not to terrify you with how possessive I am. We see if this actually works outside of the forced proximity of the last 2 weeks. That sounds reasonable. It is, unfortunately. He smiled. Go to bed, Scarlett, before I change my mind about taking things slow. She went upstairs, her heart racing, her mind spinning. In 14 days, her entire life had shifted. She'd walked into Luca's world broken and desperate and had somehow found herself. And now, impossibly, dangerously, she'd found him too. She fell asleep wearing the green dress, too tired to change, too happy to care. Tomorrow would bring complications. Tomorrow would bring reality. But tonight, she was exactly where she wanted to be. The next 3 weeks were the kind of surreal that made Scarlett question whether she'd actually woken up from some elaborate dream. She kept her apartment like Luca suggested, but she barely spent time there. Most nights ended at his place, in his bed, learning the geography of a man who'd rebuilt her from the ground up and was now taking her apart in entirely different ways. Dating Luca Devereaux was nothing like dating Marcus had been. Marcus had scheduled their relationship around campaign events and networking dinners. Luca disappeared for days without explanation, then showed up at her door at midnight with takeout and stories he probably shouldn't tell. Marcus had opinions about everything she wore, ate, said. Luca watched her like she was the most fascinating thing he'd ever encountered and never once suggested she be different. It should have been perfect. And it was, except for the parts that weren't. Like the morning she woke up alone in his bed and found him in his office at 4 a.m., bruised knuckles wrapped around a glass of whiskey, staring at security footage of something he wouldn't let her see. "Come back to bed," she'd said from the doorway. "Can't. Work." "Luca, go back to sleep, Scarlett." His voice had been flat, distant, the warmth she'd come to expect completely absent. She'd gone back to bed, alone. When she woke again at 7, he was beside her, sleeping like nothing had happened. But his knuckles were freshly bandaged, and there were scratches on his neck that definitely hadn't been there when they'd fallen asleep together. She didn't ask. She was learning that there were parts of his world he wouldn't share, boundaries he'd drawn that she wasn't invited to cross. It should have bothered her more than it did. Maybe it would have, if she wasn't so busy rebuilding her own life. She'd started painting again, set up a corner of her apartment with canvases and watercolors, and let herself create without judgment. The first few attempts were terrible, rust showing through years of neglect. But slowly, something emerged, color and movement and pieces of herself she'd forgotten existed. She also started job hunting, not museum curator positions that would bore her to tears. Real jobs. Things that interested her. She interviewed at a nonprofit that worked with at-risk youth, teaching art as therapy. The director, a woman named Rosa with kind eyes and zero tolerance for nonsense, looked at her portfolio and asked hard questions about why she'd quit her last job. "I was in a relationship that required me to be smaller than I was," Scarlett had said. "I'm not anymore." Rosa had smiled. "When can you start?" The job didn't pay much, but it felt right. Kids who needed to learn that creating something could save them, that expressing pain through color and shape was better than swallowing it until it poisoned you from the inside. She understood that now in ways she hadn't before Marcus, before Luca, before she'd been dismantled and reassembled into someone who knew her own worth. She told Luca about the job over dinner at one of his restaurants. He'd insisted on celebrating, pulled strings to get them a private table, ordered wine that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "I'm proud of you," he said, raising his glass. "But this is exactly what I meant. Building a life based on what you want. It feels good, really good." She paused, though Rosa asked some pointed questions about you. "I'm sure she did. What did you tell her?" "That you're complicated, that you helped me when I needed it, that I'm choosing to be with you despite knowing exactly what that means." And she accepted that? She said if you ever hurt me, she knows people who know people. I think she was joking. Maybe. Luca laughed. "I like her already." They were halfway through dessert when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression changed, hardened into something Scarlett was learning to recognize as trouble. "I need to handle something," he said, already standing. "Now?" "Yes. I'll have my driver take you home." "Luca, what's wrong?" "Nothing you need to worry about. I'll call you tomorrow." He kissed her forehead, quick, distracted, and left before she could protest. The driver appeared within minutes, polite and silent, and took her back to her apartment. Scarlett spent the night trying not to imagine what handling something meant when you were Luca Devereaux, trying not to picture violence or danger or the 100 ways his world could swallow him whole. He didn't call the next day, or the day after that. On day 3, she called him. It went to voicemail. She tried not to panic, tried to remember that he'd warned her this would happen, that his life came with complications she wouldn't always understand. On day 4, she showed up at his house. Helen answered the door, looking tired. "Miss Hayes, he's not here. Where is he?" "I'm not at liberty to say." "Helen, please, I'm not asking for details. I just need to know he's okay." Something softened in the older woman's face. "He's alive, that's all I can tell you. He'll reach out when he can." It wasn't enough. but it had to be. Scarlett threw herself into work, spent long hours in the nonprofit, working with kids who were angry and brilliant and broken in ways she recognized. A girl named Maya, 14, who painted exclusively in black and red and wouldn't talk about why. A boy named Jordan, 16, who drew intricate architectural designs and said he wanted to build buildings that wouldn't fall down like his family had. She understood them. She knew what it felt like to need art to survive, to use creation as a way of processing pain too big for words. On day 7, Luca finally called. "I'm sorry," he said without preamble. "Things got complicated." "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Can I see you?" "When?" "Now. I'm outside your building." Scarlett looked out the window. His car was parked at the curb, dark and expensive and out of place on her street. She grabbed her keys and went down. He was leaning against the car when she emerged, and he looked like hell, exhausted, thinner, like he hadn't been eating. There was a fresh scar along his jawline that hadn't been there a week ago. "What happened?" she asked. "Complications." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have right now." He pulled her close, held her like he needed the contact to remember how. "I missed you." "I was terrified. You disappeared for a week, Luca." "A week? I thought—" "I don't even know what I thought. Nothing good." "I know. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." "Don't promise things you can't control." He pulled back, looked at her with something that might have been surprise. "When did you get so direct?" "You taught me. Remember?" "I remember." He touched her face gently. "Come back to my place. Let me make this up to you." They drove in silence. His hand found hers in the dark car, held on like an anchor. When they got to his house, he pulled her straight to his bedroom, kissed her like he was trying to erase a week of absence, made love to her with an intensity that felt almost desperate. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets that cost more than furniture, Scarlett traced the new scar on his jaw. "Tell me what happened." "There was a situation. A business partner who decided he wanted more than his share. I had to remind him why that was a bad idea." "Did you hurt him?" "Yes." "Badly?" "He'll recover, eventually." Luca caught her hand, brought it to his lips. "Does that bother you? Knowing I'm capable of violence?" "I already knew that. What bothers me is you disappearing without warning. What bothers me is wondering if you're dead in a ditch somewhere while I'm teaching teenagers about watercolor techniques. I can't always tell you where I am or what I'm doing. That's not going to change. I'm not asking for details. I'm asking for something. A text that says you're alive, a call that lasts 30 seconds, something that tells me I matter enough to check in." He was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. I can do that. I should do that. Thank you. You're handling this better than I expected." "What did you expect?" "Panic. Demands that I choose between you and my work. An ultimatum. I'm not interested in changing you. I just want to be part of your life, whatever that looks like." She paused. "But I need honesty, Luca. Not details, but honesty. If something's wrong, tell me. If you're in danger, tell me. Don't shut me out to protect me." "Protecting you is literally my job." "No, respecting me is your job. There's a difference." He pulled her closer, buried his face in her hair. "When did you get so smart?" "I had a good teacher." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in a week, Scarlett felt like she could breathe properly. The next month was better. Luca made an effort to communicate, even when he was handling things she didn't need to know about. Quick texts, brief calls, small reassurances that he was alive and thinking about her. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. She met more of his people, not just the men from that first dinner, but others. His lawyer, a sharp woman named Catherine, who clearly ran half his legitimate operations. His accountant, a quiet man named David, who looked like a librarian and probably knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. His sister Elena, who flew in from wherever she'd been living and took one look at Scarlett before pulling her into a hug. "Thank you," Elena had whispered, for making him smile again. They'd gone to lunch, just the two of them, and Elena had told stories about growing up with Luca, how he'd protected her from their father's violence. How he'd built his empire specifically so she'd never have to depend on anyone who could hurt her. How he'd saved her from her marriage and never once made her feel weak for needing saving. He loves you, Elena said over expensive salad. He won't say it because he's terrified of what that means, but I've known him my whole life, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. I love him too, Scarlett admitted, which is probably insane considering we've known each other less than 2 months. Time doesn't matter, connection does, and you two are connected. Elena smiled. Just be patient with him. He's not good at this, at letting people in, at trusting that they won't leave. I'm not going anywhere. Tell him that, often. He needs to hear it. But before Scarlett could tell him anything, everything went sideways. It started with a phone call at 3 in the morning. Scarlett was at Luca's place, dead asleep, when his phone started buzzing. He answered it immediately, his voice alert despite the hour. When? A pause. How many? Another pause. I'm on my way. He was out of bed before Scarlett fully woke up, pulling on clothes with efficiency that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times. What's wrong? She asked. Stay here. Don't leave the house. I'll have security outside your door. Luca. Scarlett, please. Just this once. Don't argue. Stay here where it's safe. He was gone before she could respond. Minutes later, she heard voices in the hallway. Heavy footsteps. The house coming alive with a tension she could feel through the walls. Helen appeared in the doorway, fully dressed despite the hour. Mr. Devereaux asked me to stay with you. What's happening? I don't know all the details, but there's been an incident. Multiple incidents, actually. Someone's making a move against him. Is he in danger? He's always in danger, dear. That's the nature of what he does. But yes, this is more serious than usual. Scarlett got out of bed, started pulling on clothes. I need to, do something. I can't just sit here. There's nothing you can do, except trust that he knows how to handle this. But trusting felt impossible when the sun came up, and Luca still wasn't back. When noon arrived and Helen started making worried phone calls. When evening fell and the security guard outside her door changed shifts with military precision, but no information. At 8 p.m., Catherine arrived. Luca's lawyer, looking grim and professional and like she was about to deliver bad news. He's okay, she said immediately. That's the first thing you need to know. He's alive and uninjured. Where is he? Handling the situation. There's been a coordinated attack on several of his operations. Warehouses burned. Shipments intercepted. People hurt. She sat down on the edge of the bed. Someone's trying to take him out. Not just damage his business. Actually eliminate him. Who? We're not sure yet, but we will be. And when we are, this will end badly for them. I want to see him. He doesn't want you anywhere near this, and honestly, neither do I. You're a vulnerability now, Scarlett. If his enemies know about you, and they probably do, you become a target, a way to hurt him that's much more effective than burning warehouses. The words hit like ice water. So what, I'm supposed to hide? Wait around while he's out there dealing with people who want him dead? Yes, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. Because if something happens to you, if they use you to get to him, it won't just break him. It'll make him reckless. And reckless is how people in his position end up dead. Scarlett wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could help, could do something, could be more than a liability. But Catherine's logic was sound. She wasn't trained for this. She didn't know this world. The best thing she could do was stay out of the way. How long? She asked. I don't know. Days, maybe. Maybe longer. Can you get a message to him? What message? Tell him? Scarlett stopped, trying to find words that mattered. Tell him I'm here, that I'm not leaving, that I love him, and I'm not scared. Catherine's expression softened. I'll tell him. She left, and Scarlett was alone in Luca's massive house with security guards she didn't know, and a fear she couldn't quite control. She tried to sleep, failed, tried to eat, managed a few bites before her stomach rebelled, tried to distract herself with television, books, anything. Finally, she went to his office, the one he'd been in that night at 4 a.m., drinking whiskey and watching security footage. She knew she shouldn't be there, knew he kept things private for a reason. But she needed to understand, needed to see what he saw, know what he knew. The computer was locked, but his tablet was on the desk. She picked it up, and it opened immediately. No password protection for a device in his own home. The screen showed a news article. Multiple locations hit in coordinated attacks. Police investigating possible organized crime connection. No casualties reported, but several injured. She scrolled through his recent searches. Names she didn't recognize. Business licenses. Property records. He'd been investigating someone, trying to figure out who was coming after him. Then she found the photos. Surveillance images. Grainy but clear enough to identify faces. Men watching his house, his restaurants, the nonprofit where Scarlett worked. Her blood went cold. They knew about her. They'd been watching her. And Luca had known, had seen these photos and hadn't told her because he was trying to protect her from exactly this kind of fear. She was still staring at the photos when she heard something downstairs. Voices. Movement. She set down the tablet and went to the door, listening. Can't stay here. It's not secure enough. That was one of the security guards. Male voice, tense. We're not moving her without his authorization. That was Helen, calm but firm. We might not have a choice. They just hit the restaurant on 5th. That's 3 blocks from here. Scarlett's heart hammered. She opened the door, stepped into the hallway. The guard, young, maybe 30, with the build of someone who lived in gyms, looked up sharply. Miss Hayes, you should be in your room. What's happening? Is Luca okay? We don't have updated information on Mr. Devereaux's location, but the situation is escalating. We need to get you somewhere safer. Where? There's a secondary location, more secure. Mr. Devereaux's instructions were clear. If things got worse, we move you. I'm not going anywhere without talking to him. Miss Hayes, call him, right now. If he tells me to go, I'll go. But I'm not leaving based on your assessment. The guard looked like he wanted to argue, but he pulled out his phone, made a call, had a brief, terse conversation, then handed her the phone. Scarlett, Luca's voice was rough, exhausted. Go with them, please. Where are you? It doesn't matter. I need you safe. That's all that matters right now. Luca, I saw the photos. On your tablet. They've been watching me, watching us. Silence. Then, I was going to tell you. When? When I had a plan. When I knew how to handle this without... He stopped. Just go with my people. Let them protect you. I'll come get you as soon as this is over. Promise me you're being careful. I promise. Promise me you're not going to do something stupid and heroic and get yourself killed. A sound that might have been a laugh. I promise. Now go. Please, Scarlett. I can't focus if I'm worried about you. She handed the phone back. Looked at Helen, at the guard, at the life she'd built that was suddenly too dangerous to inhabit. Okay, let's go. They packed her into an SUV with tinted windows. The guard drove while another sat beside her in the back, both of them watching the streets like enemies could appear any second. They left the city, drove for over an hour into suburbs Scarlett didn't recognize. The safe house was actually a condo in a gated community, anonymous, blending in with a dozen identical buildings. Inside was furnished but impersonal, like a hotel room that no one had bothered to make welcoming. You'll be safe here. The guard, his name was Marcus, ironically, told her. We'll be right outside. Don't open the door for anyone except us or Mr. Devereaux. Then she was alone. The silence was oppressive. Scarlett tried calling Luca. No answer. Tried texting. The message showed delivered, but no response. She turned on the television, found news coverage of the attacks. Multiple fires. One explosion. The reporter speculated about gang warfare, organized crime, turf disputes. They had no idea what they were actually reporting on. Hours passed. Scarlett dozed fitfully on the couch, woke to darkness and disorientation. Checked her phone. 2 a.m. Still nothing from Luca. Then she heard it. A sound outside. Quiet but distinct. Movement that didn't match the guard's patrol pattern. She froze. Listened. Another sound. Closer. She grabbed her phone, started to call the guard. The window exploded inward. Glass everywhere. Dark shapes pouring through. Scarlett screamed, scrambled backward, tried to run. Someone grabbed her. She fought, clawing, kicking, everything Luca had taught her in their training sessions about not being an easy victim. It wasn't enough. A cloth pressed over her mouth and nose. Chemical smell. Her vision tunneled. She heard shouting, the guards finally responding, but it was too late. Everything went black. She woke in darkness. Complete darkness. Her head pounded. Her mouth tasted like chemicals and fear. She was sitting in a chair, hands zip-tied behind her back, ankles secured to the chair legs. She's awake. A voice from somewhere to her right. Male. Unfamiliar. A light turned on. Bright. Blinding. Scarlett squinted against it, trying to make sense of shapes moving beyond the glare. Scarlett Hayes. A different voice, closer. Do you know why you're here? Where's Luca? Her voice came out rough. That's interesting. Not who are you or what do you want? Just worried about Devereaux. The voice moved. A shape crossed in front of the light. Man, tall, wearing what looked like an expensive suit. He's made you loyal, impressive considering how little time you've had together. I asked where he is. Safe for now, though that could change very quickly depending on how cooperative you are. What do you want? What everyone wants, leverage. Your boyfriend has been very difficult to pin down, very protected, very careful. But everyone has a weakness, and you, Miss Hayes, appear to be his. Scarlett's mind raced. These were the people attacking Luca's operations, the ones who'd been watching her, and now they had her, which meant Luca was about to make very bad decisions to get her back. He won't negotiate with you, she said, hoping it was true. He doesn't work that way. Everyone negotiates when the stakes are high enough. And you... The man moved closer. She could see his face now, late 40s, handsome in a cold way, with eyes that suggested he enjoyed hurting people. You're very high stakes. He pulled out a phone, took her picture, sent it somewhere. Minutes later, his phone rang. He answered on speaker. Let her go. Luca's voice, deadly calm. Right now, before this becomes something you can't recover from. Hello, Luca. I was hoping you'd call. I'm only going to say this once. Release her. Walk away. I'll let you live. You're not in a position to make demands. I have your girl, and I'll keep having her until you give me what I want. Which is everything. Your operations, your territory, your connections, all of it, signed over, legal and binding, or I start sending her back to you in pieces. The silence on the other end was terrifying. When Luca spoke again, his voice had dropped into something inhuman. If you hurt her, if you so much as bruise her, I will burn your entire world to ash. I will kill everyone you've ever cared about. I will make your death last week's, and I will smile the entire time. The man laughed. Big threats from someone who's currently outmaneuvered. You have 24 hours to decide, Luca. Everything you've built, or her life. Choose wisely. He hung up. Scarlett's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. He's not going to give you what you want. Then you'd better hope you mean less to him than his empire. The man gestured to someone she couldn't see. Take her to the holding room. Make sure she's comfortable. We want her presentable when we send the next photo. Hands grabbed her, pulled her up. The zip ties cut into her wrists. They dragged her down a hallway, concrete floors, bare walls, the kind of place where screaming wouldn't matter, and shoved her into a small room with a mattress on the floor and a single light bulb overhead. They cut the ties, locked the door, left her alone. Scarlett sat on the mattress and tried not to panic, tried to think. These people wanted Luca's empire. They'd grabbed her to force his hand, which meant they thought she mattered enough to make him surrender everything. Were they right? She didn't know. She loved him. But she also knew he'd spent his entire life building what he had. Knew it represented more than money or power. It represented survival, control, the ability to protect himself and the people he cared about. Would he trade that for her? Should he? Time passed. No windows meant no way to track it. She dozed. Woke. Dozed again. At some point, they brought food, sandwich, water bottle. She ate mechanically, knowing she needed strength. Then the door opened. Not the man from before. Someone younger, nervous-looking. He held a phone. He wants to talk to you. He put the phone on speaker, set it on the floor just inside the door. 1 minute. Then he left, locking the door again. Scarlett? Luca's voice. I'm here. I'm okay. Did they hurt you? No, I'm fine. Luca, don't do whatever you're thinking about doing. Don't give them what they want. That's not your decision. Yes, it is. I'm not worth your empire. I'm not worth everything you've built. You're worth more than all of it combined. That's romantic but stupid. These people want to destroy you. If you give them what they want, they'll kill you anyway. You know that. I know, but if I don't, they'll kill you. And that's not acceptable. Luca, listen to me. I'm not afraid. If this is how it ends, I'm okay with that. I got to live the last few months as myself. I got to love you. That's more than most people get. Don't throw everything away for stop. His voice cracked. Stop talking like you're already dead. You're not. I'm going to get you out of there. How? I have a plan. Does it involve you getting yourself killed? Probably partially. Then I don't like it. Good thing you don't get a vote. He paused. Scarlett, I need you to do something for me. What? When things start happening, and they're going to start happening soon, I need you to get down. Hit the floor, cover your head. Don't try to run. Don't try to help. Just make yourself as small as possible and wait for me. Can you do that? What's going to happen? Nothing good, but it ends with me getting you out. Trust me. I trust you. I love you. I should have said it before. I love you. And I'm coming for you, and these people made the worst mistake of their lives when they touched you. The phone went dead. Scarlett sat in the small room and tried to prepare for whatever was coming. Tried not to think about Luca walking into a trap. Tried not to imagine all the ways this could end badly. Then she heard it. Gunfire. Distant but unmistakable. Then closer. Then an explosion that shook the building. Men shouting. More gunfire. The sound of violence getting closer. Scarlett dropped to the floor like Luca had told her. Curled into a ball. Made herself small. Tried not to think about bullets coming through walls. The gunfire intensified, right outside her door now. She heard bodies hitting the floor, heard screaming, heard something that might have been her name being shouted but couldn't be sure over the noise. Then silence. Terrible, absolute silence. The door exploded inward. Scarlett screamed, covered her head. Heavy footsteps. Someone crouching beside her. Scarlett, it's me. You're safe. Luca's voice. She looked up. He was covered in blood. She couldn't tell how much was his, holding a gun, looking like violence personified. But his eyes, when they met hers, were gentle. Can you walk? She nodded. He pulled her up, kept an arm around her as he led her out of the room. The hallway was carnage. She tried not to look at the bodies, tried not to process what had just happened. Outside, more of Luca's men waited, SUVs running, escape routes planned. He put her in the back seat, slid in beside her, and they were moving before she could even process that she was free. Are you hurt? He asked, already checking her over for injuries. No, I'm okay. Are you? Some of this blood is mine, most isn't. He pulled her close, held her like he was trying to convince himself she was real. I'm sorry. I should have protected you better. Should have seen this coming. You came for me. Of course I came for you. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought, her voice broke. I thought you might decide your empire was worth more. He pulled back, looked at her with an intensity that stole her breath. There is no empire without you. There's nothing without you. Don't you understand that? Everything I've built, everything I am, it only matters if you're here to share it. Then he kissed her, desperate and claiming and full of everything he'd just fought through to get to her. And Scarlett kissed him back, tasting blood and smoke and survival, knowing that they'd just crossed a line they could never uncross. His world had tried to destroy her, and she'd survived. But the question now was whether they could survive together. They drove for 2 hours before Luca let the driver stop. Some private airfield Scarlett had never heard of, where a plane waited with engines already running. No questions asked, no paperwork visible, just efficiency that came from having enough money and power that rules bent around you. Scarlett's hands were still shaking. She'd tried to hide it in the car, curling her fingers into fists, but Luca had noticed. He'd taken her hand and held it the entire drive, his thumb tracing circles against her palm like he could calm her through touch alone. Where are we going? she asked as they boarded. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't find us while I clean up this mess. He guided her to a leather seat that probably cost more than her first car. Try to rest. I can't. I know. Try anyway. The plane took off. Scarlett watched the city disappear below them. All those lights representing lives that had nothing to do with gunfire or kidnapping, or men who solved problems with violence. Normal lives. The kind she'd had 3 months ago before she walked into Luca's club and made a deal that had led here. She should regret it. Should wish she'd never met him. Should want to go back to being the invisible girl Marcus had discarded. She didn't. Luca disappeared into the back of the plane with his phone, making calls in low tones she couldn't quite hear. When he came back 20 minutes later, he'd cleaned up, changed clothes. The blood was gone, replaced by a fresh black t-shirt and jeans. But there were new bruises visible on his arms, and he moved like his ribs hurt. "How bad are you injured?" Scarlett asked. "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Cracked rib, maybe 2. Some cuts that needed stitches. Nothing that won't heal. "You got hurt saving me." I got hurt doing my job, which is protecting you." He turned to look at her. "Scarlett, I need you to understand something. What happened tonight, that's my world. That's what being with me means. Violence, danger, people trying to hurt you to get to me. If you want out, if this is too much, tell me now. I'll make sure you're safe. Set you up somewhere far away with enough money that you never have to worry. But I need to know." Scarlett took a breath, let herself actually consider it, walking away. Going back to a life that made sense. Finding someone safe and normal who worked a regular job and whose biggest danger was traffic on the way home. It sounded boring. It sounded like dying slowly. "I don't want out," she said. "I want to know how to make sure this never happens again." Something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe. "It won't. I'm making changes. Stepping back from the front lines. The people who took you, they're gone now. And everyone else in this city just got a very clear message about what happens when they touch what's mine." "How gone?" "Very gone." His voice was flat. "I don't leave loose ends, Scarlett. Not when it comes to you." She should have been horrified. Should have felt something about the fact that people were dead because of her. But all she felt was a strange, fierce satisfaction. They tried to hurt her, tried to use her. And Luca had made them regret it. "Where are we going?" she asked again. "Private island. Caribbean. It's completely off-grid. We'll stay there until things settle down. Couple weeks, maybe. I have work. The kids at the nonprofit. Rosa knows. I called her. Told her you had a family emergency and needed time off. She said to take as long as you need." He paused. "I also made a very large donation to the nonprofit. Anonymous. Enough to fund their programs for the next 3 years. Luca, you can't go back there yet. Not until I'm sure it's safe." This was the compromise. The kids get support, you get to disappear for a while, and I get to sleep at night knowing you're protected. The plane leveled off. A woman appeared, flight attendant, though her posture suggested more training than serving drinks, with food and water. Scarlett hadn't realized she was hungry until she smelled it. She ate mechanically while Luca watched. "When did you last sleep?" she asked him. "Couple days ago." "You need to rest." "I will, once we land." "Luca, I'm fine, Scarlett." But he wasn't. She could see the exhaustion in every line of his body. The way he held himself too carefully, like moving wrong would break something. The tension that wouldn't leave his shoulders no matter how much he tried to project calm. She finished eating, then shifted closer, put her head on his shoulder, felt him stiffen briefly before relaxing into it. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for coming for me." "You don't thank me for that, ever. Coming for you isn't optional." They landed somewhere tropical. Hot air hit them the moment they stepped off the plane, carrying the smell of salt and flowers. Another car waited, this one driven by a local man who nodded at Luca with familiar respect, and they drove down roads that got progressively narrower until they weren't really roads anymore, just paths carved through jungle. The house appeared like something from a dream, modern architecture that somehow fit into the landscape, all glass and clean lines. The ocean visible from every angle. Security that was present but subtle. Cameras, sensors, men stationed at a distance but always watching. Inside was cool and minimal. Helen was already there, somehow having beaten them despite leaving hours later. She took one look at Scarlett and pulled her into a hug. "Thank heavens you're safe. I was so worried." "I'm okay, really. You're in shock, dear. That's different." She pulled back, looked at Luca. "Both of you need medical attention. I've called the doctor. He'll be here within the hour." "Not necessary," Luca said. "It wasn't a suggestion." Helen's voice was firm. "Go shower, both of you. I'll have food ready when you're done." Scarlett let herself be led to a bedroom that was all white linens and ocean views. The shower was enormous, multiple heads, water pressure that felt like therapy. She stood under the spray for a long time, watching the grime and fear wash down the drain, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. When she came out wrapped in a towel, Luca was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. He'd showered too. His hair was wet, and he wore clean clothes, but he looked hollowed out, like something had cracked inside him, and he didn't know how to fix it. "Hey," she said softly. He looked up. "You should eat. Helen made—" "I don't care about food right now. What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm fine." "Stop saying that. You're not fine." "Neither am I. What's wrong?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I almost lost you. If I'd been 10 minutes slower, if my information had been wrong, if they'd decided you weren't worth keeping alive." He stopped. "I've built this entire life on control, on knowing every variable, planning for every contingency. And today I couldn't control anything. I couldn't stop them from taking you, couldn't prevent you from being terrified, couldn't guarantee I'd get to you in time." Scarlett sat beside him on the bed. "But you did. Get to me in time. Barely. Barely counts. Not when it's you." He looked at her, and his eyes were raw. "I love you. I've loved you since the day you walked into my gym and told me you were tired of apologizing for existing. And today I had to face the reality that loving you might get you killed. That my life, the choices I've made, the enemies I've collected, puts you in constant danger. And I don't know how to live with that. So what are you saying? You want to end this?" "No. Yes. I don't know." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "I want you safe. That's all I know for sure. And you're not safe with me. That's not your decision to make." "Yes, it is. I'm the one who dragged you into this world. I'm the one who convinced you it was worth the risk. I'm the one who—" "Stop." Scarlett put her hand on his face, made him look at her. "I chose this. Me, not you. I chose to be with you knowing exactly what it meant. And today was terrifying, and I don't ever want to go through it again, but I'm still here. I'm still choosing you." "You shouldn't." "Too bad. You don't get to decide what I should want." She moved closer. "You taught me that, remember? You taught me to know my own mind, to stop letting other people tell me what I deserve. And I deserve you. All of you. Even the dangerous parts. Especially the dangerous parts. Because those are what made you capable of coming for me tonight." He pulled her close, buried his face in her neck. She felt him shaking slightly, all that control finally breaking down. She held him and let him take what he needed: comfort, reassurance, proof that she was real and alive and still his. The doctor arrived an hour later, checked them both over with professional efficiency. Scarlett had bruises from the zip ties, some minor scrapes, but nothing serious. Luca had 3 cracked ribs, a dozen stitches in various locations, and instructions to rest that they both knew he'd ignore. After the doctor left, they ate dinner on the terrace overlooking the ocean. Helen had made something that tasted like home, though Scarlett wasn't sure whose home. They didn't talk much, just existed in the same space, processing trauma in parallel. That night, lying in bed with Luca beside her, Scarlett finally let herself cry. Quiet tears that she tried to hide, but Luca felt them anyway. He pulled her closer, held her until the crying stopped, whispered things she couldn't quite hear but felt anyway. "I was so scared," she admitted into the darkness. "Not of dying, of you dying. Of you doing something stupid to save me and it costing you everything. I would have. Done something stupid, I mean, given them whatever they wanted. Walked into an obvious trap. Anything. I know. That's what scared me. Does it change things? Knowing I'd burn my entire world down for you? No, it makes me love you more, which is probably unhealthy. He laughed, quiet, exhausted. Definitely unhealthy. They fell asleep tangled together, both of them waking periodically to check that the other was still there, still breathing, still safe. The next 2 weeks existed in a strange bubble. Isolated from the real world, just the two of them and Helen and the security team that kept watch from the perimeter. Luca worked from the house. Calls and video conferences and decisions made remotely. But he was different, more present. Like almost losing her had recalibrated something fundamental. They talked, really talked, about his childhood, which had been violent and poor and shaped him into someone who valued control above almost everything. About her father leaving, her mother's remarriage, the pattern of abandonment that had made her seek validation from men who didn't deserve it. About the future they wanted to build together. I'm making changes, Luca told her one morning over coffee on the terrace. Stepping back from the dangerous operations, letting other people handle the front lines. I've built enough legitimate businesses that I don't need the rest anymore. Can you really just walk away? From the violence? Yes. From the power. That's harder. But I'm going to try. Because staying in that world means putting you at risk. And after what happened, he stopped. I can't do it again, Scarlett. I can't watch you get hurt because of choices I made before I even knew you existed. What will you do instead? Focus on the restaurants, the real estate, maybe invest in some tech startups, boring rich person things. He smiled slightly. Think you can handle dating someone boring? I'll try, but I'm keeping my job. I know. I wouldn't ask you to give it up. And I'm keeping my apartment, even if I'm barely there. Well, also wouldn't ask. And you need to promise me something. What? That you'll tell me when things are hard. When you're struggling, when the temptation to go back to your old life gets strong. I can't help if you shut me out. He was quiet for a moment. I'm not good at that, at being vulnerable. I know, but I need you to try. Okay, I'll try. They spent their days establishing a new normal. Swimming in the ocean, reading on the terrace, Luca teaching Scarlett to cook. Turns out growing up poor had given him skills that wealth hadn't erased. Scarlett painting while Luca worked, her watercolors evolving to capture the island light, the ocean colors, the peace she was slowly building inside herself. At night, they made love with an intensity that felt different from before. Less desperate, more grounded, like they'd both stared into the abyss of losing each other and decided to hold tighter instead of letting go. Elena called halfway through their second week. Luca put her on speaker so Scarlett could hear. You scared the hell out of me, Elena said without preamble. Next time you plan to start a war, maybe give me advance notice? There won't be a next time, Luca said. You sure about that? I'm sure. I'm done, Elena. Stepping back from everything that isn't legal and boring. Because of Scarlett. Because of Scarlett. And because I'm tired. I've been fighting my whole life. Maybe it's time to try something else. Like what? Like being happy. Radical concept, I know. Elena laughed. I like her. She's good for you. I know. After the call ended, Scarlett looked at Luca. Will you really be happy, giving up that much control? I don't know, but I want to find out. With you. On their last day at the island, they walked the beach at sunset. The kind of perfect moment that would have felt cheesy if it wasn't so genuine. Luca stopped, turned to face her. When we get back, I want you to move in with me. Officially. Not just staying over most nights. Actually living together. That's fast. We almost died multiple times. Fast seems irrelevant. Scarlett smiled. Okay. Okay? I'll move in, but I'm bringing my painting supplies, and they take up a lot of space. I'll build you a studio, whatever you need. They flew back to the city the next morning. Reality waiting for them like a test they hadn't studied for. But when they landed and drove back to Luca's house, their house now, she supposed, it didn't feel as overwhelming as Scarlett expected. She moved her things over the following week. Not that she had much. Most of what she owned fit in boxes that looked small in Luca's massive house. Helen helped her set up the spare bedroom as a studio, north-facing light perfect for painting, storage for supplies, a space that was entirely hers. Work was harder. Rosa had questions Scarlett couldn't fully answer, why she'd left so suddenly, where she'd been, whether everything was okay. Scarlett told a version of the truth, family emergency, needed time away, everything was fine now, and tried not to flinch at the lies of omission. The kids welcomed her back with a mix of indifference and enthusiasm that felt normal. Maya showed her new paintings, still black and red, but with touches of gold now. Jordan had finished his architectural drawings and wanted to know if Scarlett thought they were good enough for college applications. "They're incredible," she told him honestly. "You're going to do amazing things." Slowly, they found a rhythm. Luca working from home more often, having meetings in his office while Scarlett painted in her studio. Dinners together every night, real conversations about their days. Weekends spent exploring the city like tourists, finding hidden restaurants and galleries and pieces of life they'd both been too busy to notice before. It wasn't perfect. Luca still had nightmares about the kidnapping, waking up reaching for her to make sure she was there. Scarlett still flinched at unexpected sounds, still checked over her shoulder more than necessary. They were both carrying damage that would take time to heal. But they were healing together. 3 months after the kidnapping, Luca took Scarlett to dinner at the restaurant where they'd celebrated her new job. Private table, expensive wine. The owner greeting them personally because apparently Luca had invested enough that he got special treatment. They were halfway through dessert when Luca reached across the table and took her hand. "I have something to tell you, and you're probably going to think I'm insane. That's a concerning opener. I sold my stake in the remaining questionable operations, all of them. As of yesterday, everything I own is completely legal, boring, safe." Scarlett stared at him. "Luca, I know it's a big change. I know it means less power, less control. But I don't care. I care about you. About building a life that doesn't require armed security and constant vigilance. About being able to sleep at night without wondering if tomorrow brings another war. Are you sure? Really sure? I've never been more sure of anything." He paused. "Except one other thing." He pulled a small box from his pocket, set it on the table between them. Scarlett's heart stopped. "I'm not good at this," he said. "At being vulnerable or romantic or any of the things you probably deserve. But I know I love you. I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I know that every decision I make now starts with the question of what's best for us, not just for me. And I know that I want to marry you, if you'll have me." He opened the box. The ring inside was perfect, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the light like captured fire. Nothing ostentatious, just beautiful. "You're serious," Scarlett said, her voice shaking. "Completely. We've known each other less than a year." "I know." "You're technically still a criminal in multiple jurisdictions. Technically, working on that. You're controlling and possessive, and you have terrible communication skills. All true? And I love you anyway, which makes me either very brave or very stupid. Probably both." He smiled. "Is that a yes?" Scarlett looked at the ring, at the man offering it, at the life they'd built together from wreckage and violence and a desperate deal made in a club basement. It was insane. It was too fast. It was everything she'd been taught to avoid. It was also exactly what she wanted. "Yes," she said. "Obviously, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, perfect fit, because of course he'd somehow figured out her size, and kissed her across the table in a way that made other diners stare. Scarlett didn't care. She kissed him back, tasting wine and chocolate and the future they were choosing together. When they finally pulled apart, Luca was smiling, really smiling, the kind of expression she rarely saw from him, unguarded and genuine. "I'm going to make you happy," he promised. "Every single day, for the rest of our lives. I know, but I'm going to make you happy too. That's how this works." I like the sound of that. They left the restaurant hand in hand, drove back to their house through streets that felt different now, less dangerous, more like home. Inside, Helen was waiting with champagne she'd somehow known to have ready and congratulations that came with knowing eyes. That night, lying in bed with her fiancé beside her, Scarlett thought about the girl who'd walked into a club basement 6 months ago. Broken and desperate and ready to make terrible decisions. She'd been trying to prove something to her ex, trying to show him she was worth keeping. Instead, she'd proven something to herself. That she was stronger than she thought, braver than she knew, capable of loving someone complicated and dangerous and choosing that love anyway. Marcus had been right to let her go. Not because she wasn't enough, but because she was too much for someone who wanted an accessory instead of a partner. Luca understood the difference. He'd seen her at her worst and decided she was worth fighting for, worth changing for, worth building a completely new life for, and she'd done the same for him. "What are you thinking?" Luca asked quietly. "That I'm glad I walked into your club that night. Even knowing everything that came after? Especially knowing everything that came after." He pulled her closer. "Me too." They fell asleep planning a future that involved boring rich person problems, and kids someday, and maybe a dog if Scarlett could convince him. Normal things, the kind of life that people who didn't have their history got to take for granted. It wasn't perfect. They were both too damaged for perfect. But it was real. It was theirs. And that was more than enough. Planning a wedding turned out to be more complicated than surviving a kidnapping. At least with the kidnapping, Scarlett had known what she was up against. With wedding planning, the enemy kept shifting: venues, caterers, guest lists, her mother's opinions about everything. "She wants to invite 200 people, Scarlett told Luca one morning, staring at her mother's latest email. "I don't even know 200 people. Tell her no." Luca was making coffee, moving carefully because his ribs were still healing. "It's our wedding. We decide." "You don't understand. Saying no to my mother is like trying to stop a hurricane with a strongly worded letter. Want me to talk to her? And say what? That you'll have her removed if she doesn't cooperate. That's probably not great for family relations." He smiled. "I was thinking more along the lines of, we appreciate your input, but we've made our decision. But your version works too." They'd set a date 4 months out. Small ceremony, close friends, and family only. Nothing like Marcus's political spectacle. Just something real and intimate that felt like them. Except Scarlett's mother had other ideas. She'd shown up at the house 3 days after the engagement with a binder full of wedding plans she'd apparently been compiling since Scarlett was 12. Dream venues, designer dress options, a color scheme involving entirely too much champagne and blush pink. "I know you're happy," her mother had said, barely looking at Luca. "But darling, you have to think about appearances. A small wedding looks like you're embarrassed, like you're hiding something. We're not hiding anything. We just want something that feels like us. But what will people think?" That conversation had ended with Scarlett showing her mother to the door and Luca making a very large donation to keep her distracted with planning the rehearsal dinner instead. The bigger problem was the past that wouldn't stay buried. 2 weeks after the engagement, Scarlett ran into Marcus at a charity gala she'd forgotten she'd committed to months ago. She'd considered skipping, but that felt like hiding. So she'd gone with Luca, wearing a dress that cost more than her old car, feeling stronger than she had any right to feel. Marcus had approached during cocktail hour, Elizabeth conspicuously absent. "Congratulations," he'd said, gesturing to her ring. "I heard you got engaged." "Thank you." "To Luca Devereaux." It wasn't a question. That's quite a step up from museum curating. Scarlett had felt Luca tense beside her, but she'd put a hand on his arm. Her fight, not his. "It's not a step up, it's a completely different direction. But yes, I'm marrying him, and I'm very happy." "Are you? Really? Or are you just trying to prove something?" That's when Luca had stepped forward, his voice pleasant, but his eyes promising violence. "I think what Marcus is trying to say is that he's realizing he made a mistake. Isn't that right, Marcus?" Marcus had gone pale. "I should find Elizabeth." He'd left quickly, and Scarlett had exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "You okay?" Luca had asked. "Yeah, actually I am. That felt good, not needing to prove anything to him anymore." "That's because you're not trying to be who he wanted. You're just you, and you is more than enough." But that encounter had triggered something. For the next week, Scarlett found herself thinking about all the years she'd spent reshaping herself for men who didn't deserve it. Her stepfather, who'd made her feel like an inconvenience. Marcus, who'd made her feel replaceable. Even her biological father, who'd just disappeared one day like she wasn't worth staying for. She'd learned early that love was conditional. That if you weren't perfect, if you weren't exactly what someone needed, they'd leave. And she'd spent her entire adult life trying to be perfect enough to make someone stay. Until Luca, who'd seen her broken and angry and desperate and decided she was worth rebuilding, who taught her that she didn't need to be perfect, just honest. She was painting one afternoon when the realization hit her. A canvas she'd been working on for weeks, abstract shapes in deep blues and greens that somehow captured what freedom felt like. She stepped back, looked at it, and understood something fundamental. She'd blame Marcus for breaking her. But the truth was, she'd been cracked long before he came along. He'd just found the weak points and exploited them. The real damage had been done years earlier by people who'd taught her that her worth was negotiable. Luca found her there an hour later, still staring at the painting. "You okay?" he asked. "I was just thinking about my father, the one who left. I was 7 when he disappeared, just stopped coming around. No explanation, no goodbye. My mother told me he moved across the country for work, but I always wondered if it was my fault. If I'd been better, maybe he would have stayed." Luca sat beside her on the studio floor. "It wasn't your fault. I know that logically, but there's this part of me that still believes if I'd just been different, quieter, smarter, easier, maybe people would have wanted to keep me." That's the wound Marcus exploited. He found that insecurity and pressed on it until you convinced yourself you needed to change to deserve him. "Yeah." She looked at him. "How did you figure that out so quickly? Most people spend years in therapy uncovering that stuff." "Because I had the same wound, different source, same result. My father used to tell me I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything, that I was a burden. So I spent my entire life proving him wrong, building an empire, accumulating power, trying to be so successful that no one could ever call me worthless again. Did it work? For a while, until I realized I was still making decisions based on his voice in my head, still trying to prove something to a man who'd been dead for 10 years and hadn't deserved my effort when he was alive." He took her hand. "That's why I recognized it in you. You were doing the same thing, trying to prove your worth to people who couldn't see it. And I thought, maybe if I could show you what I'd learned, you could skip some of the years I wasted." "What did you learn?" "That other people's inability to love you correctly says nothing about your value. That you can't earn affection from people who aren't capable of giving it. That the only person's opinion that matters is yours. And that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who make you small, even if it means being alone for a while." Scarlett leaned into him. "I'm glad I'm not alone anymore." "Me too." They sat there for a long time, surrounded by paintings and sunlight streaming through north-facing windows, just existing together. No performance, no pretense. Just two people who'd found each other in wreckage and decided to build something new. The wedding planning got easier after that. Scarlett stopped trying to manage her mother's expectations and just made decisions. They'd get married at Luca's house. Small ceremony in the garden. 50 guests, not 200. Her dress would be simple and elegant, not the elaborate ball gown her mother had picked out. The whole thing would take 3 hours, and then they'd have dinner and actually enjoy themselves instead of performing for an audience. Her mother was furious, called it small-minded and disappointing and a waste of potential. Scarlett had listened to the entire tirade, then calmly explained that they'd made their decision and she was welcome to attend or not. But the wedding wasn't changing. Her mother had hung up, called back an hour later and apologized in her own way, which mostly involved passive-aggressive comments about how she supposed a simple wedding could be nice if that's what they really wanted. Progress, Scarlett decided, came in small increments. Elena flew in 2 weeks before the wedding to help with final preparations. She took one look at Scarlett's dress, pale gold instead of white, silk that moved like water, and smiled. "You look like yourself, that's all that matters." They were having lunch at one of Luca's restaurants, private room in the back, when Elena got serious. "I need to tell you something," she said, "about Luca, about what happened to him before you." Scarlett set down her fork. "Okay." He hasn't always been like this. Open, willing to change. There was a woman 5 years ago, before me and my disaster of a marriage. Her name was Sarah. She worked for him, handled some of his legitimate businesses. They got involved. It was serious, or as serious as Luca allowed things to get back then. What happened? She wanted him to choose, her or the violence, the criminal operations, or a real relationship, and he chose the empire. Told her he couldn't be both things, couldn't love her and stay in that world. So she left. And I watched him shut down after that, convince himself that love was a weakness he couldn't afford. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand what it means that he chose differently with you, that he sold off the dangerous parts of his business, that he's actually trying to build a life that includes space for someone else. That's not something he's ever done before. You changed him, Scarlett, in ways I didn't think were possible. He changed me too. I know, that's why it works. You're both better versions of yourselves together than you were apart. Elena paused. Just promise me something. When things get hard, and they will, because relationships are hard, remember that he's trying, that he doesn't have a roadmap for this, that every time he's vulnerable with you, it's terrifying for him. Be patient with the learning curve. I will, and same goes for me. I'm not exactly a relationship expert, but you're willing to figure it out together. That's what matters. The night before the wedding, Scarlett couldn't sleep. Not from nerves exactly, more from the surreal recognition that her life had completely transformed in less than a year. She'd gone from invisible and overlooked to engaged to a man who looked at her like she hung the moon, from apologizing for existing to taking up space without permission, from broken to whole, or at least working on whole. She got out of bed. Luca was asleep beside her, finally healing enough that the pain didn't wake him constantly, and went to her studio, pulled out a blank canvas, started painting without planning, just letting color and movement happen. By the time the sun came up, she'd created something that looked like fire and transformation and rebirth all mixed together. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. Luca found her there at dawn, still in her pajamas, covered in paint. "You're supposed to be sleeping," he said. "Big day today." "Couldn't sleep. Too much thinking." "About what?" "About how a year ago I walked into your club because I was desperate and broken and didn't know what else to do, and how that one reckless decision led here. To us, to this life. It's kind of miraculous when you think about it. Or inevitable. Maybe we were always going to find each other. Maybe it just took you being brave enough to ask for help." "You think it was inevitable?" I think people like us, people who've been broken and rebuilt themselves, recognize each other. We see the cracks and the repair work and understand what it cost. So yeah, maybe it was inevitable. Maybe you were always going to walk into that club and I was always going to say yes, and we were always going to end up here. That's surprisingly romantic for someone who claims he's bad at romance. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain. She smiled, kissed him, tasted coffee and morning, and the future they were about to make official. The wedding itself was perfect in its imperfection. Scarlett's mother cried, though whether from joy or disappointment was unclear. Elena stood as Scarlett's maid of honor, wearing a dress that matched Scarlett's in style if not color. Catherine officiated because apparently she'd gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. The ceremony was short and genuine, vows they'd written themselves that promised honesty and effort and love that didn't require perfection. When Luca kissed her, it felt like sealing a promise they'd been making to each other since that first night. Commitment to truth, to growth, to facing their damage together instead of alone. The reception was small and relaxed. Good food, good wine, good people. Rosa from the nonprofit gave a toast about how Scarlett had taught her kids that it was never too late to become who you were meant to be. Elena told embarrassing stories about Luca's childhood that made him blush and everyone else laugh. Helen cried happy tears and made sure everyone ate too much. Even Scarlett's mother seemed to soften by the end of the night, pulling Scarlett aside before she left. "I know I haven't always been supportive," she said quietly. "I wanted perfection for you because I thought that would keep you safe. But watching you today, you look happier than I've ever seen you. So maybe I was wrong about what you needed." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was close enough. Scarlett hugged her mother and felt something old and painful finally start to loosen. When everyone finally left and it was just the two of them, Luca took Scarlett's hand and led her to the pool house, which Helen had transformed into something romantic with candles and flowers, and the kind of thoughtfulness that came from really knowing people. "So," Luca said, pulling her close, "how does it feel to be married to a former crime boss turned boring businessman?" "Pretty good, actually, though I'm not sure boring is the right word. What would you call it? Evolving, choosing differently, building something that matters more than power or control, or proving we're strong enough to survive anything." "That's very philosophical for someone who's had 3 glasses of champagne. I'm a deep drunk." He laughed, kissed her. "I love you, Scarlett Devereaux." "I love you too, even though you're controlling and possessive and occasionally make decisions without consulting me. I'm working on that." "I know, we're both working on things. That's the deal." They stayed up until dawn talking and laughing and making love like they had all the time in the world, because they did. They'd survived violence and kidnapping and their own worst instincts. A lifetime together seemed manageable by comparison. The first year of marriage was an education in compromise. Luca had to learn that Scarlett needed space to create without him hovering. Scarlett had to learn that Luca's protectiveness came from love, not control. They fought occasionally, real fights with raised voices and hurt feelings, but they also learned to repair, to apologize when they were wrong, to admit when they were scared instead of deflecting with anger. Scarlett's work at the nonprofit expanded. She started teaching not just art, but life skills: how to advocate for yourself, how to recognize your worth, how to walk away from people who made you small. The kids responded to her honesty, her willingness to share her own story of transformation. Several of them started calling her their favorite teacher, which made her cry happy tears in her car. Luca sold his last questionable business and invested the money in legitimate ventures that actually interested him. A tech startup working on sustainable agriculture, a scholarship fund for kids from backgrounds like his, a restaurant group that trained formerly incarcerated people in culinary skills. He was still rich and powerful, but now that power was building things instead of destroying them. They traveled, not to escape, but to explore. Spent 2 weeks in Italy, eating too much pasta and learning to make wine. A month in Japan where Scarlett studied traditional painting techniques, and Luca pretended he wasn't charmed by the gardens. A trip back to the island where they'd hidden after the kidnapping, this time without guards or fear. Just the two of them remembering how far they'd come. On their first anniversary, Luca took Scarlett back to the club where they'd first met. It had been renovated, legitimate now, no more shadow dealings in basement rooms. They had dinner in what used to be the private lounge, and Luca told her stories about the people who used to occupy these spaces. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The old life, the power that came from fear." "Sometimes. Late at night when I can't sleep, I miss the certainty of it, the clear hierarchy, the knowledge that I could solve problems with force if necessary." He paused. "But then I remember what that life cost me. Sarah leaving. Elena's marriage falling apart while I was too busy with empire building to notice. The constant vigilance, the inability to trust anyone completely. And I remember why I chose differently. For me. For us. There's a difference. I didn't sacrifice who I was for you. I evolved into who I wanted to be with you. That's not the same thing. No, it's not. That's actually the whole point of what we're doing. What are we doing exactly? Proving that people can change if they want to badly enough. That your past doesn't determine your future. That love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone whose damage fits with yours in a way that makes you both stronger." He smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher, terrifying and intense, but good." They left the club hand in hand, walking out into a city that felt completely different than it had a year ago. Or maybe the city was the same and they were different. Either way, it felt like home. 2 years after the wedding, Scarlett got pregnant. It wasn't planned, wasn't expected, but the moment she saw the positive test, she knew she wanted it. The question was whether Luca would feel the same. She told him over dinner, no preamble or build-up. "I'm pregnant." He went completely still, fork halfway to his mouth, frozen like someone had hit pause on time itself. "Say something," she said. "I'm going to be a father." Yes. We're having a baby. Yes. He set down his fork very carefully. I don't know how to do this. Be a father. My father was. He was terrible. What if I'm terrible? What if I don't know how to. Luca, stop. You're not your father. You're nothing like him. How do you know? Because you've spent the last 2 years actively choosing to be different than who you were. Because you recognize your damage and work on it instead of passing it on. Because you're terrified of messing this up, which means you'll try not to. Your father didn't care enough to be scared. He came around the table, pulled her into his arms, held her like she was precious and breakable. We're having a baby. We are. Are you happy? Terrified, but yes, happy. The pregnancy was harder than Scarlett expected. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion that made working difficult. Her body changing in ways that felt alien and fascinating at the same time. But Luca was there through all of it, holding her hair when she was sick, bringing her weird food combinations at midnight, reading every parenting book he could find like he was studying for a test he couldn't afford to fail. They found out they were having a girl at the 20-week ultrasound. Luca had cried, which was only the third time Scarlett had seen him cry. The first had been the night of the kidnapping. The second had been their wedding day. Now this. A daughter, he'd said, staring at the grainy ultrasound image. We're having a daughter. Are you disappointed it's not a boy? No, terrified, but not disappointed. They're vulnerable in ways boys aren't. She's going to need protecting. She's also going to need teaching, how to be strong, how to know her worth, how to not let anyone make her small. You can help with that. Can I? You helped me. You can help her. They named her Sophia Elena Devereaux, born on a Tuesday morning after 18 hours of labor that left Scarlett exhausted and elated, and wondering how humans had managed to survive as a species if this was what reproduction required. But then they put Sophia in her arms, and nothing else mattered. She was perfect. Tiny and red-faced and loud, with a full head of dark hair and eyes that would probably end up the same shade as Luca's. She looked at Scarlett like she recognized her, like maybe they'd known each other in some previous life and were just finding each other again. Luca held his daughter for the first time with hands that shook. This man who'd faced down armed enemies without flinching was terrified of a 7-pound infant. I don't know what to do, he whispered. None of us do. We just figure it out as we go. What if I mess her up? Then we fix it, together. That's what we do now. We fix things instead of running from them. Parenthood was the hardest thing Scarlett had ever done, which was saying something considering she'd survived kidnapping and violence and rebuilding her entire sense of self. But at least with those things, there were clear objectives. With Sophia, the goals kept changing. Keep her alive, keep her fed, keep her sleeping, keep her from screaming, help her grow, teach her things. Make sure she knew she was loved unconditionally, not for what she did, but for who she was. Luca was better at it than he'd expected. Yes, he was overprotective. Security cameras in every room, guards stationed outside, even though they lived in the safest neighborhood in the city, background checks on potential babysitters that would have made the FBI jealous. But he was also gentle, patient. He sang to Sophia in Italian when she couldn't sleep, walked her around the house at 3 a.m. when she was fussy, changed diapers without complaint, looked at his daughter like she was the most miraculous thing he'd ever encountered. Watching him become a father made Scarlett love him even more. She saw how hard he worked to be present, to not let his work consume him, to make sure Sophia knew she was his priority. He was rewriting the script he'd been given, creating a new pattern that his daughter could follow instead of repeating his trauma. One night, when Sophia was 6 months old, Scarlett found Luca in the nursery, just watching their daughter sleep. You okay? She asked quietly. I was just thinking about everything that had to happen for us to get here. You had to get your heart broken. I had to be bored enough to take a meeting with a desperate stranger. We both had to be damaged in exactly the right ways that we could fix each other. He looked at Scarlett, and now we have her. This perfect person who exists because we both made terrible decisions that somehow ended up being the best decisions of our lives. You think walking into your club was a terrible decision? For your safety, absolutely. For everything else, the best thing you ever did. I think so too. They stood there together, watching their daughter breathe, and Scarlett thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that desperate night in a club basement to this moment of quiet domesticity. From broken to whole, from alone to family. It wasn't a fairy tale. They'd both done questionable things, made choices that hurt people, survived violence that left scars. Their love story had bodies in it, literal and metaphorical. It was messy and complicated and full of sharp edges, but it was also real, built on honesty and effort and the willingness to keep choosing each other even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Sophia grew, started walking, talking, developing a personality that was equal parts stubborn and sweet. She had Luca's intensity and Scarlett's creativity, which meant she was either going to rule the world or become an artist who challenged everything, possibly both. On Sophia's third birthday, they threw a party in the garden where Luca and Scarlett had gotten married. Kids from Scarlett's nonprofit came, along with Elena and her new partner, Catherine and David, Rosa and her family. Helen made a cake that was probably too elaborate for a 3-year-old but perfectly suited to her need to express love through baking. Scarlett watched Sophia run through the garden with other children, laughing and shrieking with the kind of unself-conscious joy that came from knowing you were loved completely. She thought about the woman she'd been 4 years ago, broken and desperate and convinced she needed someone else to validate her existence. That woman wouldn't recognize her now, and that was exactly the point. "You look thoughtful," Luca said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of wine. "Just thinking about how far we've come. Any regrets?" "None. You?" "Only that I didn't meet you sooner, though maybe we needed to be broken first to appreciate what we built together." That's very philosophical for someone who used to solve problems with violence. "I contain multitudes." He smiled. "Also, I've been in therapy for 3 years. I'm full of philosophical insights now." Scarlett laughed. Luca had started therapy after Sophia was born, determined to work through his childhood trauma before it affected his parenting. It had been hard, confronting all the pain he'd buried under ambition and control, but it had also helped. He was softer now, more patient with himself and others, still intense, still protective, but tempered by self-awareness. As the sun set and the party wound down, Scarlett found herself thinking about the lessons she'd learned, the one she taught her kids at the nonprofit, the one Sophia would learn someday when she was old enough to understand. Your past doesn't determine your future unless you let it. You can be broken and still become whole. You can make terrible decisions and still end up exactly where you need to be. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest, about finding someone whose damage fits with yours in a way that makes you both stronger. And sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk into a dangerous man's club and make a reckless deal that changes everything. Because that's how transformation happens. Not safely or predictably, but through courage and desperation and the willingness to become someone new. Scarlett had walked into Luca's world invisible and broken. She'd walked out strong and seen, and now, years later, she was teaching her daughter the same lesson. You don't need someone to complete you. You need someone who sees you completely and chooses you anyway. Someone who helps you become the best version of yourself, not by fixing you, but by giving you the space and support to fix yourself. That night, after Sophia was asleep and the house was quiet, Luca found Scarlett in her studio. She was working on a new painting, abstract shapes in golds and reds that somehow captured what love looked like when it was real and hard and worth fighting for. "Come to bed," he said. "In a minute. I just want to finish this section." He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. "You know I love you, right?" "I know." "And you know I'm grateful every single day that you walked into my club that night?" "I know that too." "Good. Because I want to make sure you never doubt it, that you're the best thing that ever happened to me. That choosing you was the easiest decision I ever made, even though everything that came after was complicated." Scarlett set down her brush, turned in his arms. "I love you too, even though you're still slightly terrifying and occasionally make decisions without consulting me. I'm working on that." "I know, we're both always working on things. That's the deal." They stood there in her studio, surrounded by evidence of the life she'd built from wreckage, and Scarlett felt something click into place. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, Not because someone chose her, but because she'd chosen herself first. And then she'd chosen Luca. And then they'd built this life together, imperfect and real and worth every difficult step. That was the lesson. That was what she'd learned through violence and transformation and becoming someone new. You save yourself first. Then you find someone who celebrates the person you saved instead of trying to change them back into who they were before. And together, you build something that neither of you could have built alone. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real.